So this man said him and his brother were twins, and he said everyone made a difference between them. Parents, teachers, anyone who was ever around called him the good twin and his brother the evil twin. When they were 9 years old, he said his brother hit a teacher in the head with a rock, and the teacher started to bleed. Now, naturally, someone would be like, oh my goodness, you're bleeding. I hit you. I hurt you. He said his brother seemed to enjoy it, and he just sat there and smiled. They're now teenagers, and he said when he got home, something happened. He still to this day does not know what his brother did, but he did hear his brother tell their father, I can unalive you right now. He said when his brother told his father that, his father knocked him to the ground, something crazy. Like he hit him so hard, he hit the floor. And as soon as the brother did get up, he stormed out the house, and they didn't see him until the next day. Throughout adulthood, his brother got into so much trouble. No one could get him on the right path, no matter how hard they tried. He stayed in jail. He even went to prison. There was a lot. He and his brother, they spoke often, but they didn't see each other often. His brother did reach out to him and said, I want to come visit you. I want to meet your, kids. I want to meet your wife. And he said, oh, yeah, sure, that's fine. So his twin comes. He's excited. They're excited he's there. And they set up the guest room for him. Fast forward, his brother told him, I'm going to step out. He was really out graping a woman. He followed her home, forced his way into her house, and graped her. Now, the husband was close to home. He ended up coming home. He saw what the twin was doing to his wife, and he unalived him. The man notices that his brother is not in the guest room, but he thinks to himself, he's a grown man. He'll call me if he needs me. He ended up getting a call from the police. The police have him come down. They want to talk to him. Detectives want to talk to him. And there were so many steps after that. He had to identify his body and everything. A couple days later, he's in his room. He said he's about to walk to his closet. Now, when he opened the closet door, he said he felt nothing but crazy heat. He said it felt so hot. It's almost like he was on fire. When he looked into the closet, he said there was fire everywhere and hands reaching out. He heard his brother's voice, and the voice was saying, help me. He started looking around because he knows for a fact, he knows his brother's voice. He closed the closet. He said he sat down on the bed for a second just to collect his thoughts, and he waited for his wife to come up because he wanted to talk to her about what just happened. When his wife did come upstairs, she was able to just fall right to sleep. He couldn't sleep, so he was pretty much staring at the ceiling. He could feel himself dozing off, but he said right as he was dozing off, he could feel something moving at the foot of his bed. His brother is standing at the foot of the bed, and he said that he looked like his brother, but he didn't feel like his brother. His eyes were lifeless, and he looked terrible. The son wakes up. He said that he's screaming for him and his wife, but his wife is still asleep. He wakes up. He runs in the room to see what's going on, and his son tells him, Uncle was in my room, and he kept trying to get me to hold his hand, and I didn't want to hold his hand. He brings his son back to the room with him. He walks over to the closet, and while he's walking over to the closet, he gets this burning sensation on his leg. And so he pulls his pajama legs up, and he said that he saw a handprint around his leg. He thought he must be going crazy. He rubbed his eyes, he blinked a few times, and he looks back down at his leg, and there's no handprint anymore. He walks over to his closet. There are no clothes, no shoes. He said all there is darkness. He sees his brother standing in the darkness, and he sees hands reaching out, grabbing at his brother. Now he says his brother is screaming out, I don't want to go. Please help me. And before he knew it, his brother just disappeared into the darkness.
What would you do if your dog started refusing to go into one room, losing weight, and then your child lets you know that there's a little boy in the corner that keeps checking inside him? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about someone who said that their family dog saw something before anyone else did. It started with the dog. That's why I listened faster than I probably would have otherwise. We had an old lab mix named Murphy who was gentle and lazy and obsessed with food. He wasn't the kind of dog who got nervous over nothing. So when he suddenly stopped going into the den, I noticed. At first, he'd just hover at the doorway and refuse to step over the threshold. Then after a few days, he stopped even doing that. He'd stand in the hall and stare into the room with his ears pinned back and this low sound in his throat that I had never heard from him before. I figured maybe there was a mouse in the wall or something electrical buzzing in there, or even maybe some smell we couldn't pick up on. But then he started losing weight. Fast. The vet checked him and ran blood work and told us they didn't see anything obvious. And we changed his food. We watched him more closely. He ate and he drank, but he still kept dropping weight. Around the same time, my 6-year-old started saying there was a little boy in the den. That room was mostly shelves and a recliner and one ugly lamp I kept meaning to get rid of. My kid liked to color in there while I folded laundry nearby, so the first time they said, "The boy in the corner wants Murphy to come closer," I honestly thought it was pretend play. I said, "What boy?" And they pointed to the far corner by the lamp and said, "That one." There was nothing there. I laughed it off, and then my kid said, "He doesn't like when you laugh." That made me stop. I asked what he looked like, and they said, "He's skinny. He keeps counting." I did not ask more that day. A couple nights later, Murphy finally went into the den on his own. Only he didn't go far. He crept in maybe 2 steps and then froze. Just stood there staring into that same corner while every hair along his back lifted. My kid was sitting on the floor with crayons and looked up at him and said, real casual, "He's checking your ribs again." I grabbed my child so fast, it scared both of us. And that night, Murphy slept pressed against our bedroom door instead of at the foot of the bed. After that, things moved quick. Murphy started waking up growling at the den door. We'd hear his claws scrape on the hardwood around 2 or 3 in the morning and find him in the hallway, staring into the dark room like he was waiting for something to come out. Then I started hearing whispering in there. Soft, a child's voice maybe. I never caught full words, just enough sound to know I wasn't imagining a house settling. My husband still thought there had to have been some normal answer, mice or the vents. Our kid watching something creepy online and scaring himself. Whatever helped him sleep. Then one evening our child came into the kitchen and said, "He says Murphy is hollowing out." I remember the exact way those words hit me. I asked who said that. And they said, "The boy, he sits inside him and counts." That same night, Murphy threw up in the hallway outside the den. There was blood in it, and at the emergency vet, they found nothing they could explain well enough to match how bad he looked. He stayed overnight, and we brought him home with medicine and the instructions, and of course, no real answer. He lived 2 more days. On the last night, I woke up because I heard Murphy making this awful sound from down the hall. Not barking, more like choking around a growl. I ran to the den and stopped in the doorway. Murphy was inside the room. Finally, all the way in. He was crouched low to the floor with his eyes fixed on the corner. And in that corner, I saw him. A little boy. Thin arms, bare feet, and dark hair hanging over his forehead, and he was crouched with his head bent like he was studying something on the ground. Then he looked up at me. His smile was too wide for a child's face, and without taking his eyes off me, he said, 32. Murphy collapsed, and my husband got there right after me. By the time he hit the light switch, the corner was empty. Murphy was still breathing then, but barely. He died in the car before we made it back to the emergency vet, and we buried him 2 days later. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't, because after Murphy was gone, my child stopped going near the den entirely. I asked why, and they said, "He's mad there's nothing left to count." We moved out within 3 months. I know how that sounds. We moved because of one room, a dead dog, and a story about a little boy in the corner. Fine, that's what it sounds like. I also know what my child said while we were packing the last box. They looked into the empty den and said, "He says that you would have been next, Mommy." Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. The series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. The company that sent me that gold ring that was like the fitness tracker sleep tracker, all that jazz. Asked me if they could send me a pink one, and I said, of course. I just now got it out of the box, and I like this one so much better than the gold one. 10 out of 10. It feels less bulky, and I love the color. It tracks sleep, fitness, heart rate variability, oxygen saturation, stress levels. It even tracks your menstrual cycle if you want it to. Something I wasn't aware of, though, is that you can connect your partner's ring to yours, or like link it or something. I don't know what all that entails, but I thought that it was really interesting. Anyways, it is really cool. It's down here if you want it now under the story. This happened to me when I was around 13 years old in Ohio. I sent it to another scary story creator and they didn't believe me. So I'm hoping you will. Starting off strong. My siblings, 2 brothers and my sister. I have more, but they weren't there. Me and my boyfriend at the time and his sister were all walking in the woods at night. You guys are so brave. There's around 6 of us. We were camping nearby. This trail is pretty known, but we broke off into a less known branch that's not on the maps. My boyfriend, my brother, and my boyfriend's sister all had the flashlight. I was in front because I knew the trail best. A while into the trail, they ran back to our site. I decided to keep going because the other way would be quicker to get back, but I had no flashlight and a dead phone. In the middle of the woods at night? Hell no! At the start of this trail, there's a big opening that's for tables to eat at. This night, there was a group camping there, college-age students. We had passed them a while back and thought nothing of it. Then I saw one singular small tent just off the trail. I assumed that they were part of the college kids and kept going. I could barely see the trail in the dark, but I could see it just enough to follow it. Then I started hearing things fall around me, which made me nervous. It would make me shit my pants. If I shit my pants in the middle of the woods but there's nobody around to hear it, does it make a sound? Then I saw something bigger fall on the trail in front of me, so I ran back, and when I passed that small tent, there was a tall, lanky-looking man crouching next to it, holding something that looked like a hatchet. I ran faster. Yeah, you better get the fuck out of there. When I finally got back to the campsite, I was out of breath and pretty pissed off with my siblings and my boyfriend. We broke up a few months after. I'm not saying they were right leaving you behind, but you did decide to continue going by yourself with a dead phone and no flashlight. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm literally just going off of what you're telling me, okay? When we went back to the trail the next day with my dad, the little tent was gone and all there was a hatchet. My dad said that it was probably the college students, but they were still there camping. I don't know who that man was. He didn't seem human. I don't know what hit the trail. It didn't sound like a branch. I just know I never walked those trails alone again at night. To be fair, walking trails at night alone is never a good idea. I'm not gonna say that I don't believe you. I absolutely do believe you. You're in the middle of the fucking woods. In the dark. Who the fuck knows what's out there? You know what I mean? Rated on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. Please go follow my backup page. I will tag it this time, I swear to God. I'm trying to save up for a car. And the money that I make off of that account is the money that's going towards the car. Okay, thanks. I'll see y'all the next episode. Stay spooky, friend.
I have a scary story for you today that comes to us from someone who lives on a rural property. And at the time that this story takes place, she said that she was actually staying in the home by herself because her husband was traveling for work. But she wasn't alone. She did have her 2 dogs with her. I also realized when I started recording this video that I never finished my makeup this morning. There were other things that I wanted to do and I just walked away. I didn't blend. I didn't put mascara on, nothing. Today is a severely ADHD day, so this is not intentional. Anyway, this person who we're just going to call Carmen, she said that she lived rural. She didn't live on a farm. They did have some property. She said about 3 acres. They lived in a smaller house, a smaller cabin type house. There were woods that did line the back of their property. They had a backyard that was fenced in. She said it wasn't a privacy fence. It was basically like one of those fences, like a horse fence. But then they had put wire up along that fence to make sure that nothing could really get in or get out. Her husband did travel for work, so she was at the house often by herself. She said that she never felt anything threatening, any sense of impending doom. She always felt very safe where she was. Even though where she lived was rural, she said she did have neighbors that were not too far down the road. So she never felt completely secluded, and she also had her 2 big dogs that always stayed with her when her husband traveled. The day that this story takes place, Carmen said that she had stayed home the entire day. She didn't go anywhere. She didn't see anyone because she actually really wasn't feeling well. She told me that normally before bed at about 9:30, she would let her dogs out into their fenced-in backyard to use the bathroom. However, this night she decides, I'm going to go to bed early. I'm going to let them out at about like 8:45, and then I'm just going to go on ahead and head to bed because I'm really not feeling well. She opens the door that goes to the backyard, and immediately her two big dogs, they start growling and barking, and they immediately take off and beeline it for the corner of the fence in her backyard. Carmen said at this point she is ready for bed. She has plugged her phone in on her nightstand. She is in her jammies. She really doesn't want to deal with this right now. She's thinking there's just an animal out there in the woods along the fence line, and my dogs are reacting to that. So they do keep a flashlight by the back door. So Carmen grabs that flashlight, she flicks it on, and she starts shining it around the yard. She doesn't see anything, but her dogs will not leave this corner of the fence. They're just standing there barking, snarling, growling. She said this is really not like them. They do not do this. So she's thinking, there's an animal, it must be hurt, it must be stuck, something is wrong. So she has her little slippers on, she walks outside in her little jammy jams, and as she gets closer to the corner of this fence, she says that she can see something that looks like a black trash bag laying on the outside of her fence, just where the woods kind of meet her property line. She said it was not far, maybe like 3 feet. So she sees this and she's thinking, okay, my dogs are seeing this. It looks like maybe somebody dumped some trash. It's not normal. I don't really know how that got there, but that's weird. But this is what my dogs are reacting to. So she kind of walks out there to tell them that it's okay. And she is still shining her flashlight on this trash bag so that she can show her dogs, like, look, like it's just an inanimate object, like it's completely fine. As she gets closer, she says that she realizes that this trash bag is actually moving. And as she gets even closer, she says, I realize this is not a trash bag because I see a man's hand. Carmen says that this does startle her. She's afraid. She realizes, oh, this is an actual person that is laying outside of my fence. That's very strange. But Carmen also said, I have the survival skills of a ripened avocado. She says she just stops where she is. She keeps shining her flashlight, and she actually asks this person, hey, are you okay? If you are on the edge of your seat screaming at Carmen, me too. So it's fine. She recognizes this. She asks this person, hey, are you okay? And she says that this person slowly stands up. And she said it doesn't even look like a normal stand up. It's basically like he unfolds from this weird little pretzel that he was laying in, hoping that she wouldn't see him. Once he stands up, Carmen says she realizes that this man is perfectly fine. And she says that's when it hits her. Her dogs are still snarling and barking and very upset. And Carmen realizes I should probably be afraid. Now, Carmen has left her cell phone inside charging on the nightstand because remember, she was getting ready to go to bed. So she doesn't have her phone. But she knows that this guy doesn't know that she doesn't have her phone. All Carmen has right now is this flashlight and her two big dogs. This man is standing on the other side of the fence about 10 feet away from Carmen. She slowly starts to back up. She grabs her dog's collar and slowly starts to go back to the house. She said, I'm not turning my back on this guy. I just tell him, hey, I don't know what you're doing here, but you're trespassing. You need to leave. Man looks at her and says, no. Carmen says, okay, well then I'm going to call the cops. And he says, don't do that. Girl! This man starts to approach the fence, kind of hang his arms over the fence, and then her dogs start to go ballistic. She says her dogs are not trained in any sort of like protection or anything like that, but in that moment, she knows that her dogs would have protected her, would have hurt this person. So she says, I know it was a lie, but I end up telling this guy, my dogs are highly trained, and if I give them the cue, they will come after you. Do not come into this yard. So the guy does not go over the fence because these dogs are still going crazy. So she's slowly backing into the house. She does not turn her back on this man. She gets inside, gets both of her dogs inside, locks the doors that lead to the back, makes sure that the front is locked, with still keeping an eye on the back doors. Like I said, it was a small cabin type house, an open layout, so she could see all the entrances. She gets to the bedroom. She grabs her cell phone, immediately calls authorities. Authorities say, like, we're 15 minutes out. We'll be there in 15 minutes. But Carmen's neighbor is actually a local sheriff. So while she is on the phone with 911, she texts her neighbor and lets him know that someone is trespassing on her property and she feels threatened. He says it doesn't take 35 seconds and this man is pulling into her drive with his patrol car. Lights are on, sirens are going, hoping that he can just scare this guy off if he is trying to enter the home. So her neighbor, who's the sheriff, he jumps out of his car. He runs up to the house and he's like, where is he? And she tells him he was on the back corner of that fence. Carmen says that her neighbor immediately takes off, running towards that back corner of her property. He kind of stops at the corner of the fence, looks around, doesn't see anything, but kind of jerks his head towards the woods as if he hears something. So he immediately just takes off running into the trees. Carmen says that the responding officers to her call into 911 must have been traveling at light speed because they get there about 7 minutes later. They hop out of their car, they see the other sheriff car in the driveway, they're asking kind of what's going on, and she says, my neighbor just took off chasing something into the woods. So they then take off and follow into the woods. About 5 minutes later, the four of them come walking out of the tree line. So the two on-duty officers and her one neighbor who was off duty have subdued this guy. He's cuffed, and they're just kind of walking him towards their patrol cars. And says she does notice that her neighbor who she had texted is carrying some type of a book bag. Carmen says she does not want to have any other interaction with this guy who was standing at the corner of her fence, so she's not going near the patrol cars, but one officer does stay with him. They have him in the back, and then her neighbor and the officer come up to her house to talk to her. Her neighbor tells her that in this book bag, they had found certain things that could inflict things, and also a notebook with notes about Carmen's schedule. Where she went, when she let her dogs out, when she normally went to bed, when her husband normally traveled. This guy who was on the outside of Carmen's fence had plans. He had apparently told the officers as well as Carmen's neighbor that the only reason that he did not follow through with whatever he had planned was because her schedule was off and her dogs. Carmen said that this is still very fresh. This guy is currently incarcerated. However, since he didn't actually do anything and they can't prove what his intent was, he will soon be out. Since this incident, Carmen says that her husband has requested to stop traveling for work, so he is no longer leaving her alone at the home because of what happened. They also have put up a security system as well as security cameras and fenced in their entire property line, even into the woods. She says she knows that this probably won't deter him if he does want to come back as far as the fencing, but it gives her peace of mind. They also on this fence have mounted cameras so they can see if anyone does come onto their property. Carmen says it's a very unfortunate incident because in a place that she had always felt safe, she no longer felt safe. She said it seemed like a safe area. We were rural. We weren't, around a bunch of people who could find you or see you, and we trust all of our neighbors, and it has always seemed like a safe place, but she says now that security is completely shattered. In telling this story, Carmen hopes that she can bring awareness to other women to always be aware of your surroundings. Even if you are somewhere that you think that you are safe, always have your cell phone on you, always have some sort of protection on hand, even if it's your own backyard, especially if you are alone and by yourself. I'm not really sure how the legal system works or operates in situations like this. I don't know what this man could have or would have been charged with. I'm not sure, and Carmen did not elaborate. She just let us know that he is incarcerated and did get time for this. However, I don't know what his exact charges were. There are so many stories that I can tell you, and when I tell them, I don't feel fear from them. I more so feel fascination and a want to understand. However, when it comes to sharing stories like this, these are the ones that scare me because honestly, there is nothing scarier in this world than human beings. But I hope that everyone has a really great day. I'm really sorry about my makeup, especially my eyeshadow. I didn't blend it. I don't know. Some days I just have really bad ADHD, and today is one of those days. And I don't even know. I don't know. Girl, I don't know. Okay, bye.
So apparently this recently happened in Guerrero, Mexico. So for context, this guy says that he lives in a neighborhood called Cazahuates, which is like in the edge of Guerrero, Mexico. In order to get back home, his only options are to get a taxi or a combi. And if you don't know what a combi is, it's basically like somebody's van that they converted into kind of like a bus situation where people pay a lot less, but they get a ride. Sometimes it's really packed and you're like right next to somebody in there, but it's a lot cheaper than getting a taxi. So he ends up having a work event on Tuesday that happened in the center of town, and it went past the time that they said it was going to end, so he ended up leaving there around 10 p.m. Because he doesn't want to pay for a taxi, he ends up walking to this park where he knows it's the base where all the combis are parked at. He wanted to check and see if the combi that takes him to his actual town was there, but it wasn't. There was another one that got him at least close to where he needed to be. He was also crossing his fingers because sometimes some of these men that work on these combis live where he lives, so when they drop everybody off, they still end up going towards his town. He was crossing his fingers that that was one of the guys and maybe he could still give him a ride home. At the end of the ride, he realized that it wasn't one of the guys that lives in his hometowns, and he unfortunately had to walk from whatever town he was all the way to where he lives. Unfortunately, the road that leads to where his neighborhood is completely alone. There's no houses and there's also no street lights, so he ended up taking his phone out with the flashlight so he can make his way back home. When he was halfway through the walk, he could tell that there was somebody actually coming his way, so eventually he was gonna run into whoever the person was that was walking away from town. At first, he was kind of excited to see that he wasn't alone on that road, but then in the same note, he got a little bit scared that somebody might rob him, or what if it was like a crazy person? That's exactly what he was thinking about when he realized that the guy was close enough to where he could distinguish his facial features and everything like that. And in that instant is where he got really fucking scared. So the story is in Spanish, and the guy explains the person that he's seen looks to be 2.5 meters tall, which is like a little over 8 feet tall. And the reason that he made that observation was because there was only one house at the edge of his hometown, and that house is abandoned. And the reason why he thinks that it's 8 feet tall or 2.5 meters is because the man's head was hitting the second floor balcony of that abandoned home. And that wasn't even the end of it. He also could tell that this man was wearing no clothes or shoes. He is completely naked. By this point, the guy is about to walk right next to him, and the only thing that he thought of doing is saying good evening to the guy. So in Spanish, he looks at the guy and says buenas noches, and the only thing that this guy did was turn to look at him. He looked at him and smiled, but it wasn't no normal smile. He says that it looked psychotic. So the way he describes it is he had a really big smile from ear to ear, but that his eyes were so wide open. Like this. Scaring myself. Or was it that? So as this guy is smiling from ear to ear with his eyes wide open, turns to look at him after he says good evening to him, he notices that the guy is now crossing the street and is about to go in his direction. And the only thing that he thought of doing was getting this pocket knife that he had in his backpack. He said that he was ready to fight for his life and that he thought running away was not an option, being that this guy was huge. He would catch him like no matter how fast he ran. And honestly, he also didn't want to run because there's no fucking way that he would give this thing his back. In that moment where this guy is like walking towards him, and he says that it must have been seconds, like seconds where this guy is about to get to him, and it felt like forever, is when he noticed that there were two bright lights of like a car coming in their direction. He realized that it was a truck that was just about to drive, and what he did is stand right in front of that truck to where like you can't go anywhere unless you want to hit me. He's pleading this guy in the truck for a ride, and because of how he looked, because how scared he was, this guy ends up telling him to get into the truck. Thankfully, the guy was already driving towards his hometown, and he does end up dropping him off right in front of his house. When he enters his home, he cannot control his body. He's physically shaking. That expression that that giant man gave him with a big smile and the eyes wide open, he says that he cannot erase that from his memory. He does end up having a conversation with his family and explaining to all of them what he saw. They did take him very seriously. They didn't tell him he was lying or anything, but they believe that what he saw that night was a demon. And not just that, the family also firmly believes that that guy showing up in that truck that night was help from like beyond. The reason why they do think that is because it is so rare for somebody to actually give you a ride not knowing you and being in the middle of like this road. He must admit that he is a skeptic to these paranormal things, but this situation, this thing that he lived that night, he has no answer for it. He has no idea what to make of this. Unfortunately, this is where the story ends, but like my question is, did the guy in the truck see that giant? Because by that point he was about to like walk into his side of the road, because like where did the giant go? Or did he not ask him? Honestly, he was probably scared as fuck to the point to not ask him, and being that he really wanted that ride, yeah, I wouldn't bring it up again either. But what do you guys think?
Guys were at a party at my house that no one else saw but me. This is Eric's Spooky Scary Storytime submission about the most unbelievable encounter he's ever had. And he said this took place 25 years ago when he was living in Puyallup, Washington. Had to look up how to pronounce that town. I thought it was Puyallup, which is fun. It's fun either way. But Eric says he was at a desperate time in his life when he moved into this house. He was in college, and the house was just outside of town. One side was a cliff, and the other side was the only neighbor that shared an unkempt dirt driveway. Says a lot of strange things happened leading up to the night that he encountered these two men in this house. But to give you some context, this house was a 1920s Sears house, which meant that it had been picked out of a Sears catalog and that everything needed to build the house was delivered to the property and then built by the homeowners. And it was old, it was dirty, it had not been updated. That it was seriously neglected, but it was dry, it was cheap, and it was near the school that he was attending. It was a 4-bedroom, 1-bathroom with 2 stories and an enclosed porch, and a friend of his had asked him if he wanted to rent a room. And the other guys that lived in the house he was cool with, so it suited his needs at the time. And his room was clearly the master bedroom. It was bigger and it had higher ceilings than the other bedrooms. A walk-in closet and a small window that faced a light pole, which was on the edge of this cliff. And when I say cliff, I mean the house was perched on a hill about 20 feet off the main road that passed this house. It wasn't like they were on a side of a mountain or anything, but a very steep drop-off. The room was also situated on the main floor of the house while the other bedrooms were upstairs. And this detail is important because he wanted to point out that his bedroom was just off the kitchen and the main living room. The time the story takes place, Eric was working at a chain hair salon, and he said his days weren't grueling by any means, and he was very rarely tired during the day. But on this one particular day, he wakes up and he's extremely tired, which was unlike him, and his girlfriend calls the house. And he had just started dating this girl. She was a single mother to a 2-year-old. He calls his house phone, he answers, and she's like, "Surprise, we're in your driveway, come outside." So he goes outside, and he remembers he wanted to hang out with her, but he was also just so tired. So he invites them in, and he's saying, I think I need to take a nap. She and the little girl are in the living room, and as they're having this conversation, the girl interrupts their conversation, and she's screaming, and she's chasing somebody invisible around the pool table. And they just think, oh, she's just a little girl being a little girl, and they watch her for a minute interacting with nothing or someone that they couldn't see. And it was very clear that she was playing with someone or something. Both just wrote it off as a little kid being a little kid. But then a wave of exhaustion hit him, and he was like, I'm so sorry to do this, but I really think I need to lay back down. And she says, "It's okay." They said their goodbyes, and his girlfriend and her daughter leave. He goes, "Okay, I'll call you later." And he goes back in his room and lays down, and he said he fell asleep instantly. And when he woke up, it was completely dark in his room, which was strange because normally the street light outside would illuminate the room if it was nighttime. The sun was clearly down and the street light was off, and he remembers thinking this is so strange. And he tried to sit up, but he couldn't move, and he said it felt like a thin sheet was covering his entire body. And the more he tried to sit up, the tighter the sheet restricted his movement. He tries to sit up again, and it gets even tighter, and now he feels like he can't breathe, and he starts to lose consciousness, and he just remembers this feeling of panic taking over him, and he just remembers thinking, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you off of me." Because I don't know what possessed me to say it. I just thought I was having this episode of sleep paralysis, but it felt like there was another presence in the room. It was strange. But as he says it, there's this loud popping sound in his ears. And then all of a sudden he realizes that every light in his room is on, and the street light from outside is illuminating the bedroom. As he's processing this brightness and trying to figure out how he managed to sleep through the entire day, he realizes that he's overwhelmed with the sound of voices coming from the living room outside of his room. It sounds like 20 or 30 different people talking, and he can hear someone breaking the cue on the pool table. Here's the stereo blasting full volume, and he's like, "What is going on?" So he walks to the door and he opens it up, and there is a full-on party happening in his house. The house was completely full, and as he's standing in the doorway trying to process this, his roommate walks up to him and is like, "Hey, are you okay?" And Eric just said he felt like his energy was heavy, something was off, and he's like, "I just need some fresh air." So he walked to the front door. Out on the porch, there are easily 60 people standing in his front yard, and he's standing there just taking it all in. Still not feeling quite like himself when out of the corner of his eye, he sees 2 people that stand out. And they're 2 men, and they're walking up the driveway, and they're staring dead at him. Both the men were wearing wide-brimmed cowboy hats, black trench coats with black shirts and pants underneath. They weren't talking to each other or anyone else as they navigated the crowd, heading straight for Eric, still locked eyes with him. They stepped among the crowd silently and carefully as to not touch anyone as they did. And as they're nearing the porch, Eric realized that nobody else had encountered these men. Nobody was moving out of their way. Nobody even seemed to give them a second look. Just as they reached the porch, still staring at Eric, they veered off and headed straight into the patch of blackberry bushes on the cliff side of the house. Something about their presence shook him to his core. He doesn't know what it was exactly, maybe the way they were dressed or maybe the way that they locked eyes with him. But after they disappeared through the blackberry patch, he couldn't shake the feeling of, "I need to know what happened to them." So he ran through the crowd and ran through the bushes, but they were nowhere. He said it was a cliff. There was nowhere for them to disappear to. And so he turned around and he started asking everyone in the crowd, "Hey, who are those 2 guys in the cowboy hats?" But no one knew who he was talking about. Eric ran frantically person to person, asking all of them, "Hey, do you know who those 2 guys were that just walked through here? They were dressed in all black wearing cowboy hats." And every single person looked at him like he was crazy, and a few people even asked him if he had taken any substances. It shook him so badly that he ran into his room, grabbed some stuff, and went to his girlfriend's for the night, and he said he moved out shortly thereafter. And this is strange because a few weeks after this incident, the house exploded spontaneously, never found a reason for it. Could just be an old house, but another thing that he pointed out was one time when they were exploring the property, they found 3 empty graves behind the house. So who were the men? Eric says he has no idea, he has no explanation, and even though it's been 25 years, it is still the creepiest experience he's ever had. Let him know your thoughts. I have a bunch more spooky scary story times submitted by listeners coming this weekend.
Someone in my dream somehow told me that my husband was cheating on me. Spooky story time. A follower named Inez sent me the story, and she said that her and her husband were together for a very long time. They got engaged and then they got married. At this point in their time, they had been married for about 8 years and they had 2 children. They seemed to be very happy. He worked in the oil fields and she was kind of used to his on again, off again, I'm home, I'm leaving kind of schedule. Nothing was ever weird, nothing was ever off until she started having these crazy, vivid dreams. She said that her very first dream was her dropping off lunch to her husband at the job site unannounced. She had this random girl that she's never seen on the passenger side of her vehicle, and this girl was like whispering stuff in her ear like, I need you to drive faster, I need you to get there, I have a feeling that he's doing something, I have a feeling that he's doing something. And she's like, okay, yeah. And in her dream she felt like this person was a friend. She gets there again unannounced, parks by his truck, and he is in that truck with another woman. Of course she wakes up and she's like, okay, what was that about? Talks to her husband about it and he's like, that's weird. Like, first of all, I would never do that. Second of all, who was that person that was telling you things? Inez was like, I have no idea. I've never seen her before in my entire life. And then the dreams started to come daily. Second night, again, this random person is knocking on her door and she's like, hey, I was on my way to the supermarket. I saw your husband driving past me, going to this nail salon with another girl. And she's like, what? And she's like, come on, let's go. They get in the vehicle. Now, whoever this random girl is driving this time. Driving to the supermarket. Apparently, there was some nail salon right next door to the supermarket. She peeks into the window, and there is her husband with another girl. Again, tells her husband, and he's like, all right, this is getting kind of crazy. Now you're accusing me of things, and you need to stop. Inez was like, yeah, you're right. Maybe it's just my imagination. Now I'm freaking out. Like, everything's fine. Day 3. Another dream. This dream, her husband is barbecuing in the backyard, and here comes this random girl, her friend, and is like, I need to see Rodrigo. We're just gonna call him Rodrigo. She's waving her phone at Inez and is like, did you see this? Someone posted a video and he was in the background making out with this girl. Fast forward, Inez wakes up and she's like, all right, I'm just gonna ignore it. My husband is upset about this. I'm not gonna make this into a big deal. About 3 weeks later, she is driving to the supermarket. She sees a truck that looks like her husband's. And she's like, I thought he was out of town working. So she follows it. She's like, whatever. Pulls into the supermarket parking lot, kind of follows it around. There is, in fact, a nail salon adjacent to the supermarket. And she just parks there. She's just looking. She's watching, and she's like, I'm tripping. Everything is fine. Her husband gets off of the truck, comes around, opens the passenger door, and here is a woman. Hell no. He's holding her hand, and they are walking towards the nail salon. You guessed it. Obviously, things unraveled. She left him. Long story short, who was this mystery woman? Her friend that kept on appearing in her dream. In one of those dreams, it ended up actually happening. Like, what is going on? But shout out to this ghost girl for being a girl's girl, because what do you guys think? Was this a ghost? Was this the universe trying to tell her something? Or was this a glitch in the matrix? Let me know what you guys think. And also, if you guys have a spooky story that you'd like for me to read, please send it via DM or email, because I'd love to read it. And I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye!
South Africa always has the spookiest stories. Somebody submitted a spooky story saying that they were attacked in South Africa by a serpent mystical creature. I am back with another spooky story. So this person says that they live in South Africa in KZN province. This experience happened to them when they were a kid, and they are still shaken up about it till this day. We're gonna call the person who submitted this story Lwazi. Well, Lwazi at the time lived with his mom, who was working as a security guard and often worked night shifts. So one day she decided to let him stay at her friend's house as a caretaker, to make sure that he was good. His mom's friend had 2 daughters, Izzy and Jennifer. So one day his mom's friend sent him with one of her daughters, Izzy, to go look for a boy that was spotted at a nearby dump site. The dump site was located close to a swamp, and this swamp had a bad rep. Kids would go swimming there and some of them would never come back. It is said that there is a serpent that lives in the swamp. Parents would often warn their kids not to go swimming there. Some say it's the home to, and I'm sorry if I butcher this, Nkanyamba, which is a powerful serpent in Zulu mythology, and it is said to bring about chaos and destruction if disturbed or angered. It often lives in spooky and solitary large bodies of water. So when they get to the dump site, Izzy gets distracted by some of her friends that they had encountered. Then suddenly, Lwazi hears a call. His vision went blank. All he could see was an image of where he's supposed to go. His mind felt like he was in a total trance. It wasn't like a voice call, it was like a mermaid call, without the humming, just pure hypnotic energy. So Lwazi begins walking, and after a while, an arm grabs his arm, instantly snaps out of the trance. By the time he looked up, he was already at the edge of one of the rivers that spread from the swamp. After that, they continued to search for the boy, and they ended up at the heart of the swamp, where kids go missing. Turns out the boy they were looking for was swimming in the middle of the swamp. Izzy gets distracted by her friends again. Now here's the strangest thing. The swamp water is often green with algae. That day it was crystal clear. It was so breathtaking you could feel like drinking it. But while Lwazi is looking at the water, he peeps something swim inside the water very fast, and it was serpent-like. It was so fast he could barely see it. It swam right in between the boy's legs. Lwazi tried to warn the boy. He thought that Lwazi was just being crazy, so he ignores him. Suddenly, it speaks to him again. This time it's an actual voice. Voice he can only describe as a non-gendered voice. He describes it as smooth and compelling. The voice tells him to take off his clothes and get in the water. It spoke again, being very persuasive, saying, Don't worry, it's just a quick swim. You'll be fine. So at this point, Lwazi starts taking off his clothes to do as he's told. So he goes to the riverbed. He's sitting there, feet dangling in the water. Izzy is still distracted by her friend, not paying attention. Without any warning, Lwazi gets slammed really hard into the water. And as he's opening his eyes, that's when he saw it. Just to clarify, by this point, the boy had already left the water. Anyway, he saw it. By instinct, his arms grabbed onto it. It had a large body while he was on his back. It was holding on to his ankles so tight. It describes the scales to be very hard, harder than normal snakes. It was constantly shifting in color, but mostly it was black. When Lwazi looked up at its head, it had like this red-looking hair swaying in the water, and it had horns, like actual horns. The actual face he couldn't see. While all of this is happening, it's going down deep pretty fast. At the back of his head, there was a light behind him, and it was golden. At that moment, Lwazi felt this rush of energy and began to fight back, to force the creature's head upwards, but the creature kept fighting with this creature until Lwazi grabbed onto its neck, and the creature ended up shaking him off of him. But when he did that, Lwazi felt a large hand pulling him from behind. Before he knew it, he hit the surface of the water. So he quickly made an effort to swim to shore. As he's swimming to shore, a voice in the back of his head goes, a voice saying, "Hurry up, it's coming." And the boy that he had came there looking for jumped in the water at this point to help him get out. And he too saw the creature and was freaked out as well. After he put on his clothes, his friends asked him what happened down there. From their view, they saw the water behaving like a sea in a stormy night, which isn't normal for a swamp. When he got home, he explained everything but was told to keep hush about it. He finally told his mother a few weeks later. Mother told him that he got lucky. Most people who encounters this creature doesn't come out alive. Told him that he must have some special gift. So fast forward to 2020, it was early morning and he's headed to school. That day it was raining and he had to cross a small bridge, the same bridge that passes over that swamp. So as he's crossing the bridge, before he knew it, he was in a trance yet again. He nearly tipped over the edge, and at that point he snapped out of the trance and ran like heck. He can't go anywhere near a spooky looking water source because he's been warned that whatever that creature is will try to take him. And Lwazi wants to know that if there's anybody living in South Africa or otherwise that may know what is going on with him, why this keeps happening to him. He says it's no fun living life knowing that a supernatural entity is out to get you. Not gonna lie, it's horrifying, especially once you once face death. Well, that is the end of that spooky story. Thank you so much for submitting your spooky story. Again, I tell y'all, South Africa has some of those spookiest stories. If you have a spooky story that you want me to tell, feel free to submit it to me right here on TikTok or on Instagram. Make sure you are hitting that follow button for more spooky content from your favorite Haitian homegirl.
If you were born and raised in Jersey like I was, do you guys remember the legend of the Blue Hole? This story takes place with me and my two cousins, and we went down to the Blue Hole in the middle of the Pine Barrens back in New Jersey. It was like any other weekend where we would take the Weird New Jersey book, we would flip a page, and we would just pick a spot. Whatever we landed on, that's where we would go. And at that time, we landed on the Blue Hole. It was a hot summer day, and it was typical for me and my cousins to go to the Pine Barrens and start swimming in the lakes. But the Blue Hole was a place where nobody was supposed to be swimming, because the legend has it, people jump in and they don't come back up. This story isn't the same as that, but it is very similar. We get to this Blue Hole, and what it is basically it's a lake down there in the Pine Barrens, but it's completely desolate. It's in the middle of nowhere. The moment that we got there, we all immediately got this really eerie feeling, you know, the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Could just feel this real weird dark energy in the air. We all start walking around the lake, the edge of it, just kind of scanning our surroundings. Not only were we a fan of the legend, but we found it really interesting that there were certain parts around the edge of this lake where just things were not growing. Like it was almost like when someone dumps oil on the ground and then nothing grows there for 10 years. Just very bare spots. Creepy. Well, as the folklore goes, we all decided to play along with it, which was a very bad idea for my cousin. He decides to get real ballsy and say, well, I'm gonna jump in. Mind you, we were a little bit skeptical of this one, so we didn't think anything was gonna happen till she started taking off all of her clothes, and then we realized, holy crap, she's serious. Now, mind you, this lake is deep, it's swampy, the myth is it's supposed to be bottomless, so we were all like, all right, you think you're being ballsy? We dare you to jump in. And she did. Out of everything that I'm about to tell you that happened, I would have to admit, one of the creepiest things that happened out of this story was that when she jumped in and went under, everything in the wilderness behind us went dead silent. No birds, no crickets, nothing. Not only did it take her a minute to come back up, but when she did come back up, she was gasping for air and started screaming. Now, my cousin Amanda was typically the dramatic type, so we genuinely just thought she was being dramatic and messing around with us, or she actually was scared and just being dramatic. So we realized that she was stuck swimming in one spot. That's when we realized, oh shit, this is kind of serious. And two of us went in and grabbed her, and we started to pull her out, but we noticed there was a lot of resistance, thinking, oh my God, she jumped in and she landed in deep mud and she's sinking, until we finally drag her out of the water. And this chick had scrape marks all down her legs, man. Like, I'm talking all down the back of her legs, around her legs. It looked almost like fingernails. It could have been sticks, I understand that, but it looked like somebody went like down her leg. I can tell you that I've never seen her cry in fear like that. Once we got her to calm down, she started telling us it felt like somebody was grabbing my ankles and trying to pull me under the water. I asked her, I said, so when you jumped in and you didn't come back up, like, is that the reason why? She said that she didn't come back up because she did plan to mess with us at first, and then it got serious when she tried to come back up. And the creepy part about this is she said it didn't even feel like something like ghostly or out of this world. She said it felt like a person. Any other weird experiences in any other state, put them down in the comments. I would love to read them. Follow for more crazy stories in my life.
My ghost, Miss Pike, did something to me this weekend. I'm going to tell you all about it. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time, Fright Night Files. First things first, if you're new to hearing about Miss Pike, I grew up in a haunted house. Miss Pike, there's a whole playlist telling all about her, but she likes to show up and show out every once in a while, and this weekend she did just that. So my son had prom on Saturday. They have this thing called Project Prom, like after prom that you go to, and they play games and do all this stuff so they can win prizes, all the things. So I worked that. And we were there from midnight until like 5 in the morning. So we get home and we noticed that something had like leaked in my son's room, and we were trying to clean that up, and I had put like some cleaner stuff on it, and I was going to have to let it set for a little bit. So I came into my office. I don't like being in my office after 4 p.m. and not until like 9 a.m. because it's just weird in here. So I came in here and I was going to just be on the couch and just chill and watch TikToks and stuff until I had to go and like wipe that cleaning stuff up. And I was going to have to set an alarm, and I didn't want it to wake my husband up. So that's why I was in here laying on the couch. So I sat down on the couch and I'm facing my desk, like facing this way. And then there's like over here, let me see if I can get it in. Do you see like where that candlestick holder is? Like right there. And then there is like the stained glass. So I had a view where I'm seeing this, and out of the corner of my eye, I see what looks like something to like off Harry Potter, like swish and flick. It went up and then swished out and went down. Well, I thought, okay, it had to have been like a bird flying past the window or something. It was just a shadow of something. Didn't think anything of it. So I'm in here for about 10, 15, 20 minutes, something like that. I don't know. Then I go back in there to clean up in Carter's room. I come back in here and I'm go to lay down on the couch, and I lay down and I'm facing the thing. And that's when I see this in the floor. Hang on, where is it? This candlestick. Now, I have a slate floor in here. It's pure slate. So anything that falls on it, it breaks. It does some kind of like indent, scratch, something. You can see nothing is wrong with this. What I saw was her pick it up and then like swish it flat and then take it to the ground. It didn't make a sound when I heard it. So I see it in the floor and I walk over and I pick it up and I'm like holding it and I look at it and I just real quietly said, I saw you do that. And then I lay down on the couch because I was so tired. I'd been up all night, like at that thing. I lay down on the couch and I'd put this on my desk and then I hear it like roll around on the desk. And then I hear something on my desk knock over. And then that's when I figured out that it was the tripod thing that I have set up now. She knocked it over. And without even like turning back around to her, I just said, hey, I'm exhausted. Please don't scare me. Give me 30 minutes and then I'll get out of here. Nothing else happened. So I kind of dozed off. 30 minutes go by. I wake up. I go clean up the mess or whatever because I didn't trust him to do it. And then, yeah. But this falling from that height, which is, it's like 4 feet off the ground. If it had fallen on its own, I wouldn't have seen it go up. It went up and then swished out and was like lying on the ground. And it would have made a noise when it hit the slate. So she did that. She did that. She'll probably do something else again if she's in one of her moods where she's up and about and carrying on and doing all the things. So it's 4:07 right now. I'm going to end this and get the hell out of this office.
If you're new here, I tell scary stories. So let's read a scary story together. This one's called La Llorona. In August, I went on my 2-week trip to Mexico. I was ready to meet my distant relatives, which I was very excited for. Towards the end of my stay, my relative suggested that we get an Airbnb to experience the beach life and for it to be more of a chance to get to know each other. We rented it for 5 days so we could all have a little vacation and get together. On the first day, me and my cousin saw sightings of a little boy who wasn't part of our group and was often seen behind objects in the corner of our eyes. We both brushed it aside until nighttime. When night came, it seemed that I was the only one who couldn't sleep and would stay up late at night, not because of the new environment I was in, but because I felt like somebody was watching me. On the third night, I could not fall asleep for the life of me. My fear then grew. Even though I couldn't see anything, I felt something bad was happening or going to happen. I felt nauseous, anxious, and terrified. It got so bad to the point where I had to call my boyfriend for comfort, and he offered to fall asleep on the phone. I did, but no matter how much I tossed and turned, I still felt the fear and cold sweats running through my body. And that's when I heard it, her wailing. If you know anything about La Llorona, her cries let you know if you're not safe. Oh, her cries let you know if you're safe or not. If you hear her cries nearby, she's far away, but if her cries are distant, she's nearby. For my case, the cries were distant. I immediately opened my eyes as I'm tucking my bed and scanning the room, looking around at my siblings to see if they can hear it too. As soon as I realized they were in deep sleep, I quickly started praying in Padre Nuestro and praying to La Virgencita. The more I prayed, the more she started sounding louder and louder. And that's when I shot out of my bed and properly looked around the room. No one, nothing. But the fear in me stopped. The feeling of me being watched stopped. Then I was just left there with me and my reflection in the mirror. The more I looked in the mirror, the more I realized there was a shadow standing right next to me. Oh, no, standing right next to one of my siblings. But a few seconds after noticing, it went away. I laid back down and processed what was going on, and 5 to 10 minutes later, I was fast asleep. In the morning, I spoke about it, and I was bombarded with questions. Did you hear her crying or wailing? Did you hear her far or distant? How did you feel? Were you praying? Until my cousin asked me a question that made my blood run cold. Did you hear her scream for her kids? I nodded frantically as she continued on saying how she only cried for her kids to a selective group of people and how not many can hear her calling for her kids. She then went to say that the Llorona only calls for her kids around people she wants to take away the most. That sounds scary. Ever since that happened, I'm not sure if it's some kind of bad juju or if she left a mark. I've been dealing with high blood pressure and my joints are constantly in pain. I've also been getting the worst migraines. I've gone to many different doctors and I'm getting medicated for it. But the medicine they prescribe me is not helping and it's only worsening my conditions. Actually, that's very freaking scary. I was trying to take you. I've never even heard that if you hear her calling your kids like they're coming after a certain person. Okay, so they go on to say that they're sure that it wasn't an animal or something else because they were in a gated community or neighborhood. And I guess at the time that they went, like nobody could have music after 10 o'clock at night. How creepy is that? To hear it and then to start feeling sick afterwards. Have you heard about the Llorona? Or have you experienced any encounters with her? Leave it in the comments. I would love to know.
In northern Minnesota, there lies a creature so terrifying that even the locals are afraid to speak its name. Now, the Wendigo is a warning to all of us. It's the evil, the selfishness, the greed that can consume you that we have to be careful of. It's said that the Wendigo were a lost tribe. During one very harsh winter, they could not find food. So over the coming months, they became very frail, very skinny. Their skin began to hang off the bone. Their teeth and nails began to become brittle and break and turn yellow. Their eyes began to sink into their face. Their hair began to fall out, and their vocal cords began to crumble and become so dry that they could no longer talk. All they could do was scream. And it's said out of great hunger, they went to the nearby village and they began to consume them and eat them. And this caused them to be cursed and develop forever this taste for human flesh. Now, there was a story that came out of northern Minnesota. There was this man named Jeff. Jeff and his buddies had just graduated from high school, and they decided to rent a cabin up in the Boundary Waters. Now, they make this 6-hour drive up north, and they arrive in this small little cabin. There was basically one bedroom and a loft, and it was himself and 5 of his other friends, 6 of them in total. So the first night they're there, they make this large bonfire out front, and they're kind of hanging out, partying, when all of a sudden they hear what sounds like a child crying, and it's coming from directly in the woods. So they began talking amongst themselves, what if there's, a kid from another camp nearby and they're lost in the woods? Like, maybe we should go and help them. So they decided to go and see if they could find this young child. They make their way out into the woods and they begin following the sound of these cries. Eventually, they get a pretty good distance in, and all of a sudden it just becomes extremely quiet. And they hear something running through the woods, something very large. And then they hear this blood-curdling scream that shakes the entire forest. So Jeff and his friends begin to run back to the cabin as fast as they can. Well, one of his friends, Charlie, in the commotion, gets lost, and he never makes it back. So they say, what do we do? Do we go back in the woods and try and find him and see whatever, is out there, if it got him, or do we wait, see if he comes back, and then call for help? So they decided to wait there at the cabin. A couple hours later, all of a sudden they see coming through the woods, there's Charlie. He has just sort of this blank stare on his face. He doesn't say much, just walks right into the cabin, and he sits down over in the corner in this chair. So the rest of the night, Jeff is kind of concerned about Charlie because he's not talking. He's not saying what happened to him. He's just being quiet. And he's just staring at Jeff from across the room. Well, later that night, they all go to bed. And when Jeff wakes up in the morning, he goes out into the kitchen, and right there in the living room, sitting in the same chair, is Charlie. He hasn't moved, still has this blank stare on his face. And so Jeff is like, hey man, did you not go to sleep last night? Like, have you been in that chair all night? And Charlie just doesn't say anything. So he goes, well, man, can I make you some breakfast? And Charlie goes, okay. And he goes, well, what do you want? You know, I can cook you just about anything. And Charlie says, human flesh. And he smiles real big. And Jeff's just kind of like, okay, like, that's not a funny joke. So he goes off into the kitchen. The rest of the day, he notices that Charlie is becoming extremely strange. He's not talking to anyone. He's not getting out of that chair. He's just acting really weird. So later that night, the friends are all gathered around having fun. And they decide, let's go out and play sardines, which is basically hide and seek at night. So Charlie finally gets up and he goes with them. And they all make their way out into the woods, finding hiding spots. Jeff finds this series of bushes that are kind of matted down and make like this little hole. And he crawls in there and he gets down on his hands and knees and hides. After about 10 minutes, he can hear his friends off in the distance. But then he hears footsteps, the shuffling of feet getting closer to him. And that's when he sees a pair of legs standing right in front of where he's hiding. So he slowly kind of slips out of this hole. And when he looks up, there is Charlie. And Charlie is just staring at him. And he's like, hey, why don't you go hide somewhere else? Like, they're going to find me if we can't both hide here. And Charlie said, come here. And he's like, oh, okay. So Jeff comes out of this, bush. And he stands up. And he looks Charlie right in the face. And Charlie said, they're here. Do you hear them? And Jeff's like, hear what? And just then, he could hear the sounds of footsteps of stuff moving through the forest. And it sounded like it was all around them. He said, we're very hungry. And he grabs Jeff by the arms. And he pushes him up against the tree. And he said, I'm sorry, but I have to eat you. And right at that moment, as he looks at Charlie's face, he could see that it's very different. He now almost looks like a decaying corpse. And he sees these bright, glowing yellow eyes staring him directly in the face. But thankfully, right at that moment, he hears his friends. They have come looking for him. And so he runs to him. He tells him something is wrong with Charlie. Like, he is trying to hurt me. Like, he's off the rails. So they go back to the cabin. and they figure he'll eventually make his way back, and then they'll figure out what's going on. He never comes back. And after 2 days, they could not find him. And eventually, a search party did discover him deep in the woods, unclothed, in very bad shape. They said he was mentally unstable. And they end up putting him into a psychiatric ward. But he claimed that he was possessed by the spirit of a Wendigo.
This one is so disturbing. Right away, trigger warning. Unfortunate circumstances regarding animals and children. Brief, but still there. This man says that back in 5th grade, he had discovered a Pokemon-themed chat room. Inside this room were about 15 regulars, ranging from like 12 to 16 years old. They had a great time together, chatting and role-playing various anime characters. And over time, they got to know each other pretty well, to the point where they were messaging each other on AIM and even chatting on the phone. A few of the friendships even lasted 5 years. Now, one person in particular was what he describes a little bit eccentric. He said he really liked creatures and monster figurine, liked Godzilla, believed in chupacabra, which he thought was silly, but whatever. So the person telling the story is from the West Coast, and he says that this guy he's describing was from like Midwest boony type of area. Goes as far as saying Hickland. His words, not mine. We're gonna call this weird guy Greg for the story. So he says over the years, he really got to know Greg pretty well, and they'd even spend a lot of time talking on the phone. Until one night, Greg opened up to him and shared this story. Greg told him that sometimes he would black out and then wake up in the act of torturing animals and children. There were a lot of cousins and nearby kids in the neighborhood that he targeted. He even went as far as telling him that he unalived many animals. And when Greg told him this, he said he felt sick inside. I mean, what the heck? He loved animals, and this was just really messed up. I mean, obviously, and it chilled him to the bone. Greg also said that it was very difficult for him to gain the courage to admit this to him, and that he was one of the only people he was ever able to tell. And then he said things got weirder. Someone in Greg's family, or maybe a close family friend, decided that he must be possessed, that there's got to be a demon in there and they should do an exorcism. Greg went on to share that they did this exorcism at night in a dark room with lit candles. And then Greg started to choke up and cry when he told him how they tied him to the bed because they were unsure of what the demon would do. Greg got continuously more upset and his voice started to crack, and he continued to get more and more hysterical as he told the story. I guess Greg went on to describe an extremely creepy process, but he wasn't willing to share that. But what stuck out for him was the ending of the story. Greg told him that when it got to the end, like when the demon was going to be eradicated from him, they heard an audible thump as though something fell through the bed and hit the floor as the demon exited him. And then everybody saw something scurry across the floor and leave the room in the darkness. Once they finally turned the lights back on, they found deep claw marks in the wooden floor that led from underneath the bed out the door. He says Greg was completely serious about this, and he also said that whatever they did cured him, and ever since then he has no desire to hurt things anymore. He says, and then I, as any sane person would do, noped right the F out of that situation and never talked to Greg again. I don't know, man. I have a lot of feelings about this one. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. I am disturbed. And if you have a creepy story of any kind of your own, I would love to hear it. And don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
I used to do star photography in the middle of the Northwoods wilderness, and here are some unexplainable things I experienced. One spring night, I went out with my camera gear on a mile-long walk to see and watch the stars. It was a long and wide trail I was very familiar with. I'd walk that area without a flashlight often. I would like to not use a light because I had a higher chance of seeing a beautiful animal that would otherwise be startled away. And I love the darkness. But anyway, I arrive at the viewing location, set up my tripod and camera. I start taking some long exposure photos, and I hear some rustling. across the small body of water I was near. I'm very familiar with the wildlife of that area, and while there are a few bears and wolves, the population was very small. It's an isolated island with more coyotes than anything. So hearing some noises in the woods didn't bother me at all. But I tuned in to listen, trying to figure out what it could be. Moments later, whatever it was, began to let out the most deep, booming yells I've ever heard in my entire life. It sounded like both noises of distress and anger. I've never felt unnerved out in the woods of that area at night, but those noises made my blood run cold. It let out another series of yells, and my body snapped from being frozen to scooping up my tripod and sprinting with it the mile back to my car. All the while, I could hear that bone-chilling yell, although it was growing faint as I put distance between me and it. I will admit that the experience really shook me to my core, and I haven't gone out for a night hike since. My inner feeling tells me it was something I'd never experienced before. This is a second story while I was still in my night hike phase of my life. I was on a hike with my girlfriend at the time, not far from the location in the first story. We were just going to walk down the straight path until we reached the end and then turn back. On our way in the forest, it was still and serene with deep blackness surrounding us on all sides. We reached the turnaround point, and not too long into our return, we noticed this bright red glowing dot in a large tree. It was considerably bright, and we definitely didn't notice it on our walk in. At first, I thought it must be a light from a building just beyond the forest, but as we approached, we realised it was coming from the centre of a big oak tree. Almost like a reflector, but much brighter and with no light sources around. I've also walked that trail at night with no flashlight many times, and I've never noticed it. We kind of got creeped out. We made our way back out. I'm not sure what it was, but it was eerie in the moment. This last story has more to do with the first. I was out in the field behind my house that's surrounded by forest. The same forest that heard the noises my last night going out like that, but on the opposite side of the woods. I was out with my tripod again, photographing Orion, when I heard these two loud thumps on the ground suddenly, like the sound of someone purposely stomping their feet really hard to make as much noise as possible. I was kind of perplexed until a second later I heard, but couldn't see, those loud thumping steps coming quickly, thundering in my direction. I turned and ran with everything I could grab as fast as I could manage with heavy equipment. I was convinced I wouldn't make it from there to my back door. The entire run, it felt like something was going to grab me from behind. I made it back and felt a really strong sense of dread that night I couldn't place. I was always the most skeptical person in my group and had no fear of the dark forest, but after those experiences I've had, I have a bit of a different perspective of the Northwoods. A respect, definitely, but a notable sense of fear.
Today we're going to start by talking about Chuon. You know how the Chuon Origin series on Netflix was marketed as being based on real events. And most people tend to assume that's just marketing. But when people actually dug into it, they found that the cursed house at the center of the story, the one people keep entering and never leaving the same, was actually based on a real property in Nagoya. And in the show, almost as a quiet acknowledgement of that, the house is painted yellow because the real one was yellow too. And decades before the films, before the shows, it was a house that people in that neighborhood were already terrified of. And that is what we're covering today, the Yellow House. The original Chuon movie came out in 2000. Director Takashi Shimizu made this movie on a tiny budget and shot the whole thing in just 9 days. A husband murders his wife Kayako and son Toshio in a fit of rage. But their deaths aren't the end of what happens in that house. They're the start. The house becomes the site of a curse. Anyone who walks in picks it up, and it spreads through them to everyone around them. There's no way to stop it. No ritual that fixes it. It just keeps going. The film blew up, and it led to a series of Chuon movies. And Kayako became one of the most iconic horror figures of all time. In 2020, Netflix put on Chuon Origins, which, as I mentioned, leaned into the based on real events angle. Researchers who closely watched the show found it was actually weaving in real Japanese cases and real locations, not making direct adaptations, but pulling from things that actually happened. And one of those things was the Yellow House. In Japanese tradition, when someone dies peacefully with the right rituals carried out, their soul just moves on. But not every death goes smoothly. If someone dies suddenly, violently, or in the middle of some overwhelming emotion, grief, anger, something unresolved, the soul can get stuck. It doesn't move on. It stays attached to the place where it died. And in that state, it becomes what's called a yurei. And this is often translated into English as ghost, but it's more specific than that. It's a soul that literally cannot leave because the emotion anchoring it to this world is too strong. And the worst version of that is an onryo, a vengeful spirit. And the thing about an onryo that's different from how we typically think about ghosts in Western horror is that it doesn't just stay in one place. It can attach to people who enter the space, and then it follows them. There is also this concept called tatari. Basically, the idea that disturbing certain places carries real consequences, that the contamination, for lack of a better word, isn't restricted to one physical space. And this is the lens through which people in Japan were already interpreting these things when the stories about the Yellow House started spreading. In the 1980s, a couple moved in, and for a while, things were ordinary. But gradually, the atmosphere inside the house began to change. The versions vary. Some mention financial trouble, some gambling debts. Others put it down to the strain families felt when Japan's economic situation was beginning to collapse. But whatever was happening inside that house started coming through the walls. Arguments loud enough, frequent enough, that the neighbors knew the rhythms of it. They knew what the voices sounded like when things were escalating. They were starting to get vicious. And then, one day, it all stopped. Both of them were found dead inside the house. The exact details of what happened are murky. There is no clean public record of it. Some say that the wife, sick of her husband gambling money away, brutally murdered him before killing herself. Others say that the couple killed themselves after they became overwhelmed with their mounting debts. What people in the area understood was that whatever happened in that house, it ended violently. And according to everything we just talked about, that's precisely the kind of death that doesn't fully leave a place. And we don't need to look far for evidence of this. The two police officers who were called to the scene after the death, both of them were permanently affected by what they found inside that house. One of them lost his mind entirely and died. The other suffered a mental breakdown, severe enough that he became a mere shell of his former self and required indefinite hospitalization. So what did they see? We have no idea. Whatever state the house was in when they walked through that door, whatever was inside those rooms, neither of them ever gave a clear account of it. All we know is that they went in, and after they came out, they were never the same. When the house was completely empty, no tenants, nobody listed at that address, neighbors would sometimes see lights on in the upper windows at night. And people walking past late at night started reporting something else. Voices coming from inside. Not clearly, not loud enough to make out words. Just the sound of two people talking. That specific rhythm of back and forth conversation. Or an argument. The same sound the neighbors had heard through the walls for months before the incident. Nobody was living there anymore. It was as if something in the house was running the same loop over and over. But the main thing, the thing that kept bringing people out there, was the window. The upper left window specifically. What people described seeing there, across many different accounts over many years, was a woman kneeling near the glass, not moving, And the consistency of the descriptions is honestly the part that I find hardest to just explain away, because it's not like people were reporting vague shapes or shadows. They were describing the same specific thing. Same window, same position, same figure, same details. Across accounts from people with no connection to each other. One guy, I'll call him Kenji, wrote about going there one summer evening with 2 friends. They parked on the narrow road across from the building and sat in the car for a while, arguing about who would be the first to get out. And he was the one who noticed the window. At first, he thought it was just a pale object, but then he realized there was a figure kneeling close to the glass, very pale, long dark hair, completely still. And he thought for a second it might be a mannequin or some kind of prank setup. So he pointed it out to his friends, and they both saw it too. So they just sat there for a while, waiting to see if the figure would move. And then it did. Slowly, unnaturally, the head turned, not toward the window, toward them. And they got out of there right away, and nobody spoke for the first 20 minutes of the drive home. And Kenji said he couldn't stop checking the rearview mirror, just in case. One person who documents haunted locations across Japan, a writer who goes by the name Hiding from Japanese Ghosts, visited the Yellow House before it was finally demolished. And they generally approach these places with skepticism, but even they noted that the building felt super creepy, especially on the upper floor. Not only that, they also recorded stories from visitors who claimed to have seen shapes moving through walls or disappearing into empty rooms. Even with experience investigating similar locations, they described the atmosphere here as unusually unsettling. There is also an account from a woman I will call Michiko. She'd grown up near the area and knew about the house, but hadn't really thought much of it. Most people probably wouldn't. Except one evening, she was walking home past the house, and she heard a woman's voice coming from inside. And not clearly, she couldn't make out the words, more like the sound of someone talking in the next room. So when she heard this low, continuous sound, she stopped. And then the voice stopped. And then she heard footsteps upstairs, slow, going back and forth across the room, like someone pacing. And she said the thing that stayed with her wasn't really the fear in that moment. It was the quality of the footsteps. They didn't sound frantic or lost or confused. They sounded patient, like whatever was up there wasn't in a hurry. During Japan's Obon festival, when the boundary between the living and the dead is believed to be at its thinnest, people would enter the house on a dare. And after a few years, no one would live in this house, and it started to fall apart. The gradual decay of the building, combined with the stories, made it incredibly tempting to a certain thrill-seeking type of person. But those who entered the property were reportedly heard screaming and begging for mercy, like they were being physically attacked. Witnesses described it as real, raw terror. The police were called, and after entering the building, the responding officers reportedly started running around like madmen, eyes darting around the garden, screaming, "Who's there? Who's there?" And second, there's the ground floor room with a glass door facing the street. Multiple accounts mention something appearing inside. Not the woman in the window, but something else. The descriptions are always vague, almost like people couldn't bring themselves to say exactly what they saw. But there was one consistent detail. It only appeared when someone inside was losing their mind, as if this, whatever it was drawn to people in that state. And that's the full picture. Different phenomena in different parts of the house, but the same building and the same fear. So after all that, the obvious question is, what was actually going on in that house? Why was it so bad? And people who've looked into this have landed on a few different explanations. None of them provable, but all of them uncomfortable in their own way. The most straightforward one is just the deaths themselves. 2 people, a violent, unresolved ending, no proper ritual, no closure. Within the framework of everything we talked about earlier, that's exactly the kind of death that produces an onryo, a vengeful spirit. The woman in the window, the voices, the footsteps, all of it is consistent with the idea of a spirit anchored to the place where she died, replaying the last weeks of her life on a loop she can't get out of. And that is the baseline story. It explains the most common accounts. There's an unverified rumor that the triangular plot of land the house was built on was previously used as a burial ground. That at some point, the graves were relocated, but not with the care or ritual that tradition requires. No prayers, no ceremony, just bodies moved. And in the framework of tatari, that is not just disrespectful. It's an invitation. It means whatever was resting in that ground had its rest disturbed and was given no path back to its body. So it stayed. A house got built on top of it, and a couple moved in. And whatever spirit was already there now had walls around it. A single place it was tethered to. Again, this is all unverified, of course, but it would explain why the deaths of that one couple produced something so much larger than just one simple haunting. And the final theory is the one that I find strangest, because it's not about the people or the spirits at all. It's about the shape of the land. In Japanese geomancy, the traditional belief system around how land, roads, and structures interact spiritually, triangular plots are considered inherently unstable. Normal plots of land have clear boundaries. Energy flows through them in a predictable way. But a wedge of land formed where 2 roads cross at an angle sits in a kind of dead zone, where this flow of energy gets disrupted. There's no outlet. Things that enter that space, spiritually speaking, tends to stay. And the house was built on exactly that kind of plot. Nobody designed it to be sinister. It was just a cheap way to use an awkward piece of land. But if you can take the geomantic theory seriously, the house was compromised before anyone ever moved in. So the couple's deaths didn't create the problem. They just made it visible. The house doesn't exist anymore. It was torn down at some point. And there doesn't seem to be a clear consensus on when that happened, but we know it did. That triangular plot near Chimokuji Station is now just a small parking lot. Nothing is there to mark its complicated history. No plaque, nothing.
A lot of people have been asking me, what do you think about that guy who goes out provoking things like walkers and wendigos and all these supernatural creatures? Why hasn't he encountered one, and why haven't they got him? Well, you have to understand, these things work on fear. They are very selective with who they go after. They want the most vulnerable. They want the one who's going to show the most fear, because they feed off that. Okay, if you're going out looking for these things, they don't care because you're not afraid of them, right? They can't catch you off guard. They can't make you completely afraid. So they aren't even interested in this guy. All he's doing is just yelling at the wind. They are looking for those who don't really believe in this stuff, who don't think it's real. Or they are looking for people who are petrified or terrified of these things, who go out into the woods alone, vulnerable, and put themselves in a position where they become prey. You see, most of these things, right, they want to produce fear. So if they are discovered, if they make themselves known, and you know, hey, these things exist in the woods, you're not going to go into the woods, right? But if you are under the impression that these are just stories, these are just legends, okay? And you go out in the woods, right? And you're not expecting it. That puts you in a very vulnerable position. And it can make you afraid and it can catch you off guard. So a lot of these people that think that they're going to draw these things out and that they're going to somehow capture them or, fight them, that's not going to happen. They're not even going to come around because they're not interested in you. They are interested in that person that will produce the most fear. In Australia, there is something more terrifying than snakes and spiders. Now, in Queensland, there was this story from this older gentleman who lived alone in the bush. Now, every night he would sit on his porch. And on his house, he had this bright spotlight. And so one night he was sitting out on the porch and he was just enjoying the weather when all of a sudden that spotlight on the side of the house goes out. So he thinks, okay, the bulb must have burned out. I'll go inside and replace it. So after he goes inside and he grabs a bulb and he goes around, he gets his ladder and he goes up there to change out the bulb. But when he gets up there, he notices something has taken the bulb out. And so he's like, what could have happened to the light bulb? Like, did someone steal it? And right at that moment, he starts hearing the sound of two rocks clinking together. And it got a little louder. And out of the corner of his eye, he sees this tall, shadowy figure run by. So he gets down off the ladder and he runs inside, locks the door. And he immediately phones the police. Now, he lives so far out in the bush that the police cannot get there until the morning. So as he's waiting for the police to come, he keeps looking out the window. And from time to time, he would see this tall, shadowy figure sort of run by. And he would think that he saw these bright, glowing eyes that almost look like two flames. And so eventually the morning comes and the police arrive. And when he goes to the door and answers it, he said it was this Aboriginal fella. And the officer begins talking to him and he explains to him, something stole the light out of my spotlight. And I began seeing these shadowy figures and I could hear the sound of two rocks clinking together. And this officer just gives him this very serious look. And he says, that's weird because my people, we have this story of something we call a malinge. And he said, well, what's that? He says, well, he's this tall fella that has very hard skin, almost like a rock. And he walks sort of very awkward. And it said his knees slap together. And he doesn't like any sort of light. And most of the time, he'll, avoid you. But if you make him angry, it could be very bad. But he said, that's just a legend. We make up to scare the young kids. And so after the officer left, he just couldn't help but think did I make this thing mad by having that spotlight up? So that night, it started to get dark and he went back out on his porch. And as he sat there looking out off into the distance, he began to hear the sound of rocks clinking together. Clink, 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 clink. And he began to see this very tall, shadowy figure standing there with these bright, glowing eyes that look like fire. And so he instantly turned around, ran inside his house, and locked the door. But this thing didn't go away. It came up to the door and it started shaking the handle. So as he's sitting there by the door, hoping this thing doesn't come inside, it moves over to the window and it breaks out the window and it tries to come inside his house. So he goes out the back door and he runs around to his Jeep and he jumps in and he turns on the lights and he starts up the vehicle. And instantly when the lights hit this thing, it took off running back into the bush and he managed to drive out of there. So what do you think? Is the malinge real?
I made it home before I left work and somebody saw me do it. A few months ago I was working the late shift, nothing unusual, same people that I was working with, I had the same schedule that I usually do. I remember checking the clock before I left and it was a little after 10:30 and I said goodbye to my coworker and I started to drive home. I made mostly green lights, it was pretty much a straight shot. I got home, I walked in, I set my stuff down, went to bed, didn't think anything of it until the next day when I went into work. And my coworker was there and they just kind of looked at me like, in a weird way, and I was like, what? They said, are you feeling okay? And I was like, yeah, why? They said, you just seemed really out of it when you came back last night. And I looked at her and I said, I didn't come back last night. What are you talking about? I left at 10:30 and I went straight home and I didn't come back. And she said, yes, you did. You came back 20 minutes later. I kind of laughed at first, thinking she was just joking with me, and obviously she wasn't. She went to describe what happened. Apparently I walked in through the front door, the same door that I left, and I started to walk down the hallway, and she asked me if I forgot something, and I didn't answer her. She assumed that I went to the back room, but then when she came to check on me, I wasn't there, so she assumed that I snuck out somehow without her seeing. I told her that was not possible. I did not come back last night, and she pulled out the sign sheet. So we sign in when we come in, we sign in when we leave. So I had my signature sign out at 10:32 p.m. and right underneath it was my same signature that said 10:51 p.m. I don't remember writing it. I don't remember coming back. And this is the weird part. I literally live 25 minutes away. So there's no way that I could have come back to this place within 20 minutes. The eerie part is she said when I walked in, I didn't even look at her. It was like I didn't even notice her presence at all. I didn't even look in her direction. And it looked like I was just passing through, and then I disappeared. I haven't worked a late shift since because I don't know who came in at 10:51 p.m., but it sure was not me.
This story has to do with the most disturbing experience that a nurse has ever had with a patient. I'm gonna go ahead and tell the story in the first person, but it did not happen to me. Hi, my name is Samantha, and not long after I became an RN, I got a job working at a hospital located in New Orleans. The only position that they had available was night shift. The nights there were usually pretty quiet until one day an ambulance came in right around midnight with an elderly woman inside of it. When they brought the woman out, she looked completely disheveled. She was unconscious. Her hair was all knotted up. She was wearing really old, outdated clothing, and she looked visibly dirty. When we brought her in, we admitted her right away. She had no sort of ID with her. No one came with her. We had no way of knowing who she even was or what the issue was. We just knew that she was unconscious. What was weird about the whole thing is that she didn't have any visible injuries. We were trying to figure out why she was unconscious. We all just assumed that she must have just had like a mental breakdown. As we're assessing the situation, we're kind of looking her over. We notice that she has a string attached, or a string tied around her neck with a small little pouch hanging off of it. The pouch seems to have something inside of it. Then out of nowhere, she wakes up and starts screaming at the top of her lungs in a language that none of us could understand. Then her eyes rolled back all the way to the back of her head, and she started laughing hysterically, but it was like this demonic laugh. One of the other nurses was trying to calm her down, but no matter what she did, this elderly lady just became more and more like aggressive towards her while laughing. After that, we ended up having to sedate her, and we moved her into a private room. Still unsure as to what was wrong with her. We all just kept saying that she must have had some sort of mental breakdown. Then one of my other coworkers even removed the pouch from the woman's neck. He used scissors to cut the string and held it in his hand. It was small, like something meant to carry herbs and like medicine. He opened a small little pouch. We were all watching, expecting to see something simple. Instead, there was an eye. Like an actual eye. But it wasn't like your average eye. This eye was rotting. It smelled horrendous, and it was rotting so bad to a point where it literally had maggots attached to it. I literally had to cover my mouth to avoid getting sick because the smell was so overwhelming, and the little pieces of dried herbs that was mixed with the eye started to fall on the ground. Ethan quickly sealed it and inside a plastic bag. We were about to leave the room and suddenly the woman's body jerked. Mind you, this woman was sedated. Her mouth opened unnaturally wide and she started murdering again, but in an unknown language. Something dark came out of her mouth and her eyes, and they were completely white. And just like that, she stopped moving. We tried everything to bring her back, but that was it. She was gone. No one ever came to look for her or to claim her body. It was just like a mystery that died with her. To this day, I have not been able to stop thinking about that pouch. I still have no idea what any of that was about, but if you guys have any suggestions or any ideas, definitely comment down below. I think we all know what it was.
Nothing seems to be going right today, so I'm gonna just slow the day down. I'm gonna tell you a little story of what happened to me in the bathroom of the haunted house I was living in Japan. Let's get it. Also, I cut my finger. I need to slow down in life. I'm making so many easy mistakes. Okay, here we go. Story time. Now, in the mornings before school, I would always wake up earlier than everyone else because I'm not sure if it's obvious, but I was one of those scene girls in high school. And that meant that I needed to tease my hair, put on a bunch of eyeliner. It was a whole ordeal. So I would wake up early before my family to go downstairs on the main floor to the half bath. It was a half bath. It had a toilet and it had a sink. It had a mirror. I had a door. All right, it's a very tiny bathroom. The only other bathroom was in the basement where my parents sleep. We're not doing that early in the morning. So I would go to the half bath. And for some reason, this one morning, I go in the bathroom and I close the door. And I'm doing my makeup, okay? I'm all up in the mirror, doing my wingtip eyeliner. And for some reason, the bathroom mirror started fogging. There's no shower. There's no hot running water. It started fogging up. So I back up a little bit and I go, that's weird. And I wipe it down. Wipe. And I go back. I just ignore it. It's really early in the morning. I ignore it. I go back in. I'm doing my eyeliner. A couple minutes later, as I'm switching to my other eye, it fogs up again. Weird, right? And this time I'm like, okay. I wipe it down and I take a minute and I look around and I'm like, okay, where could this be coming from? Makes absolutely no sense. And as I lean in, sorry, this story is like so uncomfortable to talk about. As I lean in to do my eyeliner now on my left eye, the light shut off. It shut off. And I was like, that's weird, right? Did like something trip? What happened? I go to try to turn the light on. The lights aren't working. I go to grab the door handle of the bathroom to get out of the bathroom and finish my makeup in the kitchen or something. I don't know. I grab the door handle and it's locked. But it only locks from the inside. And I didn't lock the door. I closed it. And I'm trying to mess with the lock. I grabbed the door handle. And the way the door handle was stuck, it wasn't like I'm turning it and it just won't open. It wasn't like a stuck door. The handle itself wouldn't turn. It was like grabbing just a solid door handle and just like, it wouldn't budge. And I'm in the dark. And I'm locked in the bathroom. And in that moment, I lost my fucking mind. And I start banging on the door and I go, get me the fuck out of here. And I wasn't yelling at my parents or my sister because they're still asleep. I was yelling at whatever is fucking with me. And I was really upset at this time. And as I'm banging, I'm like, get me the fuck out of here. And I go to grab the door handle. It turns and I walk out and I look back at the bathroom. And I hear my mom walking up the stairs as she's like, what the hell is going on? And I told her, I said, the light shut off, the door locks, the mirror fogged. And she walks in the bathroom. She's looking around. She goes to flip on the light. The light turns on. The light turns on. She's looking at the mirror. The mirror is perfectly fine. She goes to close the door and unlock it, open it, and she looks at me and she was like, it's fine. And I was like, no, it's not fine. Something locked me in there. Something shut off the lights. It's not fine. So what I did was went in there, grabbed my makeup bag, just one arm. That's mine. Went into the kitchen, sat down at the kitchen table, finished up my eyeliner, went upstairs to go get my backpack for school and put my makeup bag away. When I walk into my bedroom, my backpack that was sitting on the chair at my little writing desk was sitting in the middle of my bed, perfectly right on top. And I was like, I didn't fucking put you there. I didn't put you there. You were on my desk chair. And I know that because I was packing up my homework at my desk to put into my backpack. And I left it there, grabbed my makeup bag, and went downstairs, but it was sitting perfectly on the middle of my bed. And I grab my fucking backpack, and I don't look back, and I walk down the stairs, and I walk out of the house, and I walk to my bus stop. I didn't even have breakfast at the house, you guys. I just left the house. Gone. And I got myself a little vending machine coffee, and I stopped by the little Kobini, and I grabbed myself a little breakfast, and I sat at the bus stop, and I had my breakfast, and I drank my coffee. I wasn't going to spend another second in that house that morning. And my mom walks up with my sister, because I'm supposed to walk to the bus with my sister in the morning, and I walk home with my sister in the morning. My mom walks up with my sister sometime later, and she was just like, what the hell is all that about? And I was like, I'm not spending another second in that house this morning. I know what I saw.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. I rented a room in a party house that already had someone living in it. When I was 23, I found myself drifting, renting rooms, 6 months here, a year there, bouncing around from one place to another, while I took time to try and figure life out. My drifting eventually led me to this old Victorian-style house with 4 other roommates. The rent was cheap, the house was big, and it could never feel lonely with all those other people around, so at first, it seemed fun. It felt like a perfect situation. Soon, though, I found out how the things in the house went. Every weekend turned into these all-night parties that would bleed into the morning and make it impossible to sleep. Music would shake the walls. People I didn't know were wandering in and out, smoke in the air, and bodies moving under red lights. And I swear, there was an energy in that house. A heavy and dark energy, like something stale and wrong inhabited its corners, something predatory and possessive. The feeling I would get in that house would remind me of those underground vampire clubs from old movies. Beautiful on the surface, enticing you to come in, but once you do, you realize that it's rotting underneath. After a couple months of living there, the dreams started. The first one I experienced didn't feel like a dream at all. In it, I was wandering through the house at night. There was no music, no roommates, no lights, just a silence that I had never experienced in that home since moving in. In the dream, I was walking slowly down the stairs, feeling like I wasn't supposed to be awake, like I had slipped into something hidden that house was holding onto. And then I saw her, a woman moving across the living room wearing a black dress, walking comfortably across a space like she belonged there, like she owned it. I tried to focus on her face, thinking maybe it was somebody I recognized, someone from the endless stream of people that would come in and out of this place every night, but the second I did, terror slammed into me. Instantly, I felt like I had seen something that I wasn't meant to. So I turned and ran. Up the stairs, down the hallway, back into my room. In the dream, I jumped into my bed. And that exact moment that my body hit the mattress, I woke up, breathless and panicked, as if I had actually just run there. I stayed awake for the rest of the night, staring into the dark, trying to work out what I had just experienced, and trying to convince myself that it really was only just a dream. Deep down, though, I just couldn't be convinced. A week or so later, during one of our usual get-togethers downstairs, one of my roommates casually turned to me and said, "You know, people always have problems in your room. Other people who had lived here and had it." And then she laughed, like it was nothing. And I asked her what she meant. She told me the owner of the house, one of our other roommates, had grown up there in that same house, and her grandmother had died in the room that I was staying in. My room. After hearing that, the dreams got worse. The second one was even more strange than the first. I was standing in the bathroom, just getting out of the shower, steam on the mirror, and as I reached up to wipe it away, I noticed it. Around my eyes was this black substance, like sludge, thick and oily, and it was crawling around my sockets. I manically started scrubbing at it, washing, panicking, desperate, but it wouldn't come off, no matter how hard I rubbed. And as I started to panic even more, this overwhelming dread came over me. Violation, like something was trying to cover me, to claim me. The next second, I woke up gasping, heart pounding, sweat pouring, and I remember touching my face in the dark to make sure my eyes weren't obscured. And once everything checked out, I barely slept after that. Not long after that dream, I moved out. As soon as I left, I couldn't help but notice that I felt relieved, like a heaviness had lifted, like something let me go, like I escaped. And it gave me the false confidence that whatever weirdness I had experienced there was over now. But it wasn't. Because after I left, I had one last dream, and this one was the worst of all. I was at my great-grandparents' house, a place that I had spent so much of my childhood at. A place tied to safety, to warmth, to family, something seared into my memory. In the dream, I was a kid again, running in the backyard like I used to. And I saw my great-grandfather and my grandfather standing by the side of the house burning leaves and branches. I remember asking, "What are you doing?" And my grandpa looked at me and said, "We're keeping the bad energy out." I didn't understand what that meant at the time, so I started walking around the side of the house. And through a window, I saw her. A girl, sitting alone in the middle of a room. She was facing away from me, so all I could see was her long, dark hair, and I noted that she sat still. Too still. Unnaturally still. And I kept staring, trying to understand why she terrified me. Then she turned. Abruptly, like her neck would snap with any more force, and she looked right at me. Her eyes were completely black. The same black from her hair, the same black from the sludge around my eyes in the last dream, the same black I could feel crawling around that house that I had just fled. And I remember thinking in that second that she looked at me, she sees me. Not I see her. She sees me. Every nerve in my body lit up with fear as I watched her open her mouth wide, and she screamed. A horrible scream. The room around her began shaking violently, and as the walls trembled and the windows rattled, the dream began to collapse around us. And I woke up, sitting upright, sweating and shaking, certain something had been in the room with me, that she had been in the room with me. After that, the dream stopped completely. I never had one again, and I've wondered since, was leaving that house what saved me, or was that final dream something else? Because I still think about my grandfather's words. We're keeping the bad energy out. So, is that just a dream? Or were my ancestors warning me, protecting me, keeping something from crossing over and hurting me?
The photos that I'm about to show you might genuinely be the scariest ones that you guys have sent me so far. I have a picture with some kind of creature or a ghost. It was taken in 2023 at my friend's house. I went out onto the porch and the girls closed the door. We were joking, playing around, laughing, and taking silly pictures. Everything seemed completely fine and normal. Then, after they let me back in, we started looking at the pictures that we took. In one of them, we saw a strange figure. We started wondering what it could be and thought it was the reflection of one of my friends, but unfortunately, the facial features didn't match either one of them at all. The porch was fenced because it was a terraced house, so there was no way that anyone could get in there. I was so creeped out, started crying, and we even went to church the next day to pray even though we're not religious. We still don't know what this was.
My friend was having issues with his pets barking at his laundry room door. He took this picture, saw the face, and immediately poured salt around the door and burned sage. He lives in a very old house, way out in the middle of nowhere, all by himself. He got so upset that he took all of his animals and went to live with his aunt for a few days. He moved out shortly after.
I went on my first Tinder date the other week, and my date showed up with his mouth sewn shut. The first thing I noticed was his short blonde curls, and somehow they made his blue eyes like shine a little brighter. I was almost like captivated by his beauty. But then the second thing I noticed were the stitches. He pulled out his phone and started typing something, and then I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I pulled it out and I read, "You must be Eve. It's great to finally meet you in person." And I thought about leaving, but like only for a split second, because when I saw the cheerful way that he was looking at me, I thought, what the hell? I asked, should we order something? And he nodded vigorously. So we both got small lattes and he paid for them. And then we went and sat down, but the silence was short-lived when I got another text. It said, question, what is your opinion on kissing on the first date? And I looked up from my phone and he had been like pushing out his lips and I snorted. I couldn't help it. He was funny. And he said, oh my god, I'm so sorry. That was my lame attempt at a joke. And I said, I'm sorry. I just don't know if I should like be texting you back or talking. And he texted, whatever you prefer. I was so nervous. I just started rambling about myself. I was a nurse at a local hospital. I was born and raised right here. I love traveling and I haven't been on a date in years. And, you know, maybe I shouldn't have said that last part, but he was just nodding along, very attentive the whole time. And it was really cute. Then I said, can I ask you something? He responded, of course. And I said, why coffee shop if you can't? And he responded, I love the smell, which, you know, I guess makes sense. It does smell amazing. And he said, besides, who says I can't enjoy coffee? I was waiting for it to cool down. And then he put his nose over his coffee cup and took the biggest, like, inhale that I have ever seen. And I just burst out laughing. And he said, sorry, another, like, lame attempt at a joke. But you know, it wasn't lame. It was kind of like the nicest date I'd ever been on. It'd be weird if I like told him that. So we ended up talking for like 3 amazing hours and I didn't want it to end, but I had a shift starting soon. But then he texted, would it be awful to ask for a kiss before you go? And I asked, it won't hurt, will it? And he shook his head. I mean, I didn't know why his lips were like that, but it didn't bother me, so we leaned in face to face and I only hesitated for like a second before he grabbed the back of my head and pulled me in for our first kiss. And for a moment the world stopped hurting, but when he pulled away something was wrong. Finally he rejoiced and I wanted to say something but I couldn't. My mouth was sewn shut while he smiled a toothy grin. He said, call me if you can get rid of the stitches. I really enjoyed our date.
Just in case you can't see them, they're little kitties. I don't think these are scary, but I'm translating them from Spanish to English and they're called God Has a Weird Sense of Humor. So this lady was on the bus one day and she was talking to God, asking him to give her a sign if her husband was cheating on her. A lot of people had been telling her that he was cheating and he was telling her that he was not cheating, so she just wanted a clear sign from God. For whatever reason, the bus kind of broke down in that moment, and who does she see on the side of the road? Her husband holding hands with another woman. This girl says that one day she had no food, she had no money, and she was begging God to just like give her enough money to buy a tuna and fideo. She left work and she actually started walking home because she didn't even have money to get on the bus. On the way, she ends up finding a few pesos on the ground, which was just enough to buy a can of tuna and fideo. She kind of wished she would have asked for more. One night, this girl said that she was begging God to liberate her from everything bad, liberate her from everything bad. She was almost screaming it very aggressively, almost mad. From one day to another, her boyfriend and her favorite cousin stopped talking to her. You can imagine why. Okay, this one's a little dark. So apparently this girl asked God that if the person that she was with wasn't for her, for him not to be for anybody else. That same night, he ended up having an accident and passed away. 5 days after that, she got got a message, and it was because the guy was cheating on her, and it was like the other girl. One day this girl was at work and she was talking to God and said, God, I am so tired of taking copies, because that's what she would do at work. And 5 minutes later, they fired her. This girl says that she asked God with all her might to help her stop smoking. She ended up getting pregnant. What the fuck? So this girl says that her and her friend had a dinner, and that she was telling her that she thought that her husband was cheating on her. So they both held hands and asked God that if he's cheating, to give her a sign. They left the restaurant. They had to walk to another restaurant, like just pass by it to get to the car. And who do they see in there on a date? That girl's husband. Anyway, what do you guys think? I think the creator who does these does a lot more of them. So if you know Spanish, her account will be in the description so that you guys can go listen to all of those crazy stories.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me give you guys a story time of when I met this girl at KFC. Randomly, girl decided to come sit with me, and she told me a story of how her dad was abusing her mom and she gave her dad poison. But she didn't go to jail for it because they ruled it as a suicide. So I was at this KFC and I was waiting for my food because I always get takeaway, right? So I'm waiting for my food and this girl comes up to me with her food because she was eating in. And she's like, can I please sit with you, you know? Because today is one of those days where she feels her lonely. She's at her loneliest. And she's like, can she please sit with me? I'm like, yeah, sure. She's eating, I'm not. She asked me, am I waiting for my food? Is it going to take long? I'm like, I don't know, but yeah, I'm waiting for it. It's like, no, you should eat in because I'm bored. So cool, I get my order and I just decide to sit down and I start opening the box and I'm talking to her, we're eating, and she's like, today is her dad's birthday and she doesn't know if she should mourn or she just doesn't know how she should feel. And I'm like, why? So she tells me that, you know, my dad was very abusive to my mom, and she's like, how she found this out was that she's the oldest of all her siblings, and every single time they would come back from school, her mom would be ironing clothes. And she's like, her mom only did this when her dad was home. And the reason for this is that her dad like worked like this. 1 week he worked where they stayed, the other week he had to move to another company because his dad was good like that at his job. So she's like, one day she realized that there was a problem because her mom and dad were not speaking for one, and her mom was ironing the duvets. Like, she had ironed the curtains and everything. There was nothing else to iron, and she was ironing like the duvets and all of that. And she was like, something is wrong. And so she used to take time when she came back from school because she would stay with her friends or whatever. So this time she's like, today when school comes out, for some reason, she's like, something was like, today when school comes out, I'm gonna fast walk, I'm gonna go home. Do you understand? Cool, baby girl decides after school, she doesn't even talk with her friends, she leaves and then she speeds walk home. When she gets there, she's from the gate, she can't hear anything, right? She kind of starts tiptoeing for some reason. You know that gut feeling that you have? She gets to the window and she starts listening, and she can hear her mom being like, please, like, why are you hitting me? And she's like, and the dad is like, but why did you take time to go to the shops? Why didn't you come back early? You are probably flirting with men there. She's like, I wasn't flirting with men. I was buying groceries. Boom, boom, boom. I was like, whoa, that is intense. She's like, bro. So she's just like peeking at the window. She can't really see, well, at the window that she was peeking at, and then she went to the other window where she could see because the curtains were open, and she's just watching her dad just beat on her mom like nobody's business. Opens the curtains. After her dad beat on her mom, he opens all the curtains because the curtains were closed. It was just that one curtain that they forgot. You know, people that do bad things and they tried and they cover it up, like, you know what you're doing is wrong, that's why you're closing the curtains, because you know people are going to look at you sideways, but he did it anyways. She's like, after they opened the curtains, she kind of stood and she didn't know what to do, and guess what, her mom started ironing. And she's like, she can see that her mom is crying, and as she cries, the more she cries, the more she irons. So she's like, oh, all this time you're ironing, it's because this man is doing this to you. If she didn't have anything to iron, she says she would wash the clothes. If she didn't have anything to wash, like, she would make a plan so that she can take out all her anger on cleaning, so that her kids come home and they don't see what the dad did to her. And every time the dad was not there, like, her mom was at her happiest. So she's like, every single day she would come back home early just to watch this unfold. Now she's like, one day she decided, no man, it's time I confront these people and I show them that I know that my dad has been abusing my mom. Kanti, she was opening a can of worms for her dad to now stop hiding the abuse, you know what I mean, to stop hiding the fact that he hits their mom, and started doing it in front of them. At night he was beating on her. When the mom apparently refused to sleep with him, she would beat him, she would beat her up. She's like, yeah, you're tired because you're sleeping with other men. When she was in the house this whole time. So baby girl was like, no man, you know, there's a time when they do groceries at her home, right? And they only go sometimes as just siblings and their mom, and sometimes the dad tags along. She's like, this the day that the dad was staying and it was just the mom as well as the siblings. She's like, that's when she thought she was gonna do it. Like, girl. So her dad was somebody that also struggled with sleep, right? Cool. She decided to give her dad his sleeping tablets before they left to go to the mall. And obviously when he gave her the sleeping tablets, she says she made the tea that she gave her dad with poison. But I'm like, the poison was gonna show inside the tea, don't you think? And she's like, no, like at her house they had these boba thingies, I don't know what they call them, and they used to make boba tea or sometimes make milkshakes with boba inside. So I'm like, oh. And she's like, yes. She put chia seeds and then she put the poison. She put like a little bit of chia seeds and then she put like a lot of poison inside, and then she put boba thingies inside. And her dad thought like, and then she told her dad that I mixed this with chia seeds, it's good for you, la 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 la. And then, mind you, this man had drank sleeping pills, right? Gives him the tea, and they leave. She's like watching from the door to make sure that he drinks the tea, right? So she's standing there just watching, and he's just going in on the tea, and he's like, this is kind, and he was like, this is kind of like, what is this? It's kind of like a little, it's got a little tang to it. She's like, it's probably because of the chia seeds, whatever. And the dad drank the tea. After that, she now that she sees that baby boy is actually drinking the tea without failure, she locks the door, goes inside the car, they go buy their whatevers, and when they came back, guess what? They came back and they found the man unconscious. Girl. I'm like, yo, like, didn't you feel guilty? She's like, no. After it happened, obviously the police got called, and she's like, the only time she felt guilty actually was when the police came and she thought they're gonna be like, maybe there's some foul play. And they asked like, what happened? She's like, I gave him tea, and then she took out the chia seeds as well as the boba. She's like, this is what he drank, you know what I mean? And then he drank his sleeping pills, and she was like crying, and then she went out, and then eventually they ruled it as a suicide. And she's like, after that she kind of had like some sort of relief. I'm like, yeah. So she's like, the only reason she doesn't feel guilty is because the things that she used to see this man do to her mom were just enraging. Like, they would make you. She's like, at some point her dad stabbed her mom like near death type vibes, and she had to nurse her mom. She had to see her mom lose breath and come back to life again, because she was not allowed to take she was not allowed to go to school, and her mom was not allowed to go to the hospital because he feared that he was going to go to jail, and he didn't want people knowing what was happening in the house. So she was not allowed to go to school. She had to nurse her mom. So she was just like, he had to go. And she's like, eventually she did tell her mom what had happened, and her mom was like, I knew what you did. I saw what you were doing. I know what you did, and I let you do it because I knew that if you don't do that, I'm never going to leave this man, and he's going to kill me one day. You know what I mean? So she was like, I know. I just kept quiet. And yeah, from that day she's been living her life, but now she's obviously starting to need her dad, and I feel like she was kind of starting to regret it, because, you know, she was like, so today is his birthday and I don't want to go to his grave because I know what I did. At the same time, like, I need my dad and I'm the one, la la la. I'm like, bro, so nobody suspects that what you did? She's like, nope, nobody suspects any foul play. She goes to her dad's house, her dad's family, to go visit. They treat her well. She goes to her mom's family. Like, nothing is different, nothing. But at the end of the day, like, she only feels guilty that she's mourning him now, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, I don't know, y'all, what do you think? Like, do you think what she did was right? I mean, he was like, I don't know, y'all. What do you guys think?
might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
27 years later, she realized that she had been caught for doing what she did. On the morning of September 6, 2024, a woman by the name of Carrie Mazuka is pulled over while getting her pre-work morning coffee. Carrie at the time was 52 years old, a mother, a wife, and she was going about her usual morning, stopping by Dunkin' Donuts in New York before starting her day at her real estate firm, not worried about a thing. You can imagine her surprise when police cars pull into the parking lot and surround her. An officer approaches her and tells her, "You need to come with us. Your car is going to stay here. My officers will make sure that it gets locked up and is secured, but in this moment right now, we need to take you. Can't tell you why right now, but everything will make sense once we get to the station where we can sit down and we will explain everything to you." So they put her in the car and they drive her to the station for questioning. She seems truly unsuspecting. She even says, "Can I grab my phone? Should I call my work and let them know that I'm going to be late?" She was supposed to be at work that morning at 8:30 a.m. But I'll tell you right now, Carrie Mazuka would not have a job for much longer. So once they get into an interrogation room, they sit Carrie down and they tell her the reason why she's there in the first place. The investigator starts talking about a cold case that they've been trying to solve for years and years and years. The crime took place back in September of 1997. September 7th was a regular Sunday morning and city workers were making their rounds through Washington Park in Albany, New York. And that entire day started off as normal, but things took a devastating turn when city workers found the body of a newborn baby wrapped in charred blue cloth near the Moses statue. The little body was tucked into a flower bed and it looked like someone had definitely left him there on purpose, but obviously they had no idea who the baby belonged to. There was nothing to help them figure it out other than DNA testing, but even so, this was years ago. Technology just was not as advanced as it is today. But because the baby was found near the Moses statue, authorities refer to this baby as baby Moses. He was recovered and his little body was taken in for an autopsy. Medical examiners were able to determine that baby Moses was born alive and healthy, weighing 9 pounds and 3 ounces. There were absolutely no signs of injury or natural health conditions that could have left him to be in the state that he was found in, meaning that whoever left him there made a choice. Someone looked at this living, breathing baby boy and decided that he would not make it out of that park. But because there were so many unknowns and really nothing to go off, there were no solid leads, no names connected to the case, seemingly no persons who were searching for a baby, and really no further evidence at all. So the case went cold, and for the next 27 years, it would remain cold. The case of baby Moses haunted the city. It was a gruesome, heartbreaking discovery that left an entire generation of Albany police officers and detectives scarred. Luckily, within those officers and investigators were those who never stopped searching for the truth. One commander later recalled that there were detectives who retired who still thought about that case every single day. Fast forward to 2020, the world shuts down, but inside of the Albany Police Department, detectives are hard at work. The department partners with the Cold Case Analysis Center at the College of St. Rose decide that it's time to take a fresh look at this case. DNA technology had significantly advanced since 1997, and forensic specialists take a look at the case and they manage to extract a usable DNA profile from preserved evidence. That profile sits there for 2 years. Then in 2022, investigators take it a step further. A private forensic laboratory called Othram is brought in to develop a comprehensive DNA profile for the unknown baby. Once that is complete, then it's handed off to the FBI's forensic genetic genealogy team, who run it through a forensic database search. And this is kind of where science now starts to kind of feel like a time machine, because using genealogy, police officers are then able to partner with third-party companies such as Ancestry.com or IDMean, websites like those that use DNA samples from different people around the world. They're able to then connect the dots and kind of build, definitely build a family tree, right? Because if someone does not commit a crime, if they've never been arrested and their fingerprints have never been taken, their DNA profile really has no reason to be in the database that authorities use. But if someone is willingly choosing to submit their DNA to learn about their ancestors or whatever, then using those, a family tree can then come together. And this has helped authorities massively in connecting the specific dots that they need to connect in order to then solve cold cases. So they do this for baby Moses, and the search leads investigators to identifying a relative. And after further investigative work, police determined that a woman in the Mazuka family is that baby's biological mother. That baby was left like that, abandoned, with no chance at life at all those years ago in 1997. And someone in the Mazuka family was the biological mother. The science was there. There's no denying it. I don't think they knew for sure yet, but that is why they wanted to get DNA swabs, not only from Carrie, but also from her sister, to confirm who the mother was. So now it is September 6, 2024. Carrie Mazuka is sitting there in that interrogation room listening to that investigator explain this to her, that a baby was Nobody knew who was responsible, but the science is telling us that he is connected to your family. So do you know why that would be? And Carrie, oh my goodness, you would think this was like the shock of the century for her. She audibly gasps when they tell her about the connection, and then she starts going through her family tree, naming her ex-husband, her 2 adult children, and her other female family relatives. She confirms more than once that she only has 2 kids. They ask her how many times she's been pregnant. She says 2. They ask her if there were any other pregnancies, perhaps secret pregnancies, either by her or other family members, asking if there was ever a pregnancy in the family that ended up with no baby for whatever reason. And she says, no, I only have 2 kids and they're grown up now, and no pregnancy has ever ended in a mysterious way. Nothing weird at all. They show Carrie pictures of the location in which the baby was found in Washington Park, and they also show her pictures of the baby and what he was found like, charred all around him. Someone had set a fire in an attempt to get rid of it, and Carrie goes, oh my, I have goosebumps. I'm sorry, that's so gross. I'm gonna throw up. She's gasping so loudly, covering her mouth, saying, oh my god, I can't believe it. And the officer goes, yeah, it's horrible. Meanwhile, at a different location, a group of officers have also located Carrie's sister, and they're explaining the same thing to her, informing her that baby Moses has been connected to their family tree. Both Carrie and her sister agree to cooperate with authorities, and they give DNA samples for them to test. Meanwhile, Carrie is still talking about how crazy it is that someone would leave a baby like that, knowing that there are safe haven places where a person can leave a baby no questions asked and without any consequences. Then she goes into asking specific questions about the DNA and how likely it is for them to be able to narrow down exactly who the biological mother is. She is super curious, but she is cooperating. The officer is in the middle of saying how bad things would look for someone if they lied, when all of a sudden Carrie burst out, I did it. And the officer nods and goes, you did it. Carrie Mazuka had lived a very quiet life in New York. She worked at a prominent real estate firm for over 24 years. To anyone on the outside, she looked like a completely ordinary woman, but nobody knew about the secret that she had been hiding for years. Carrie was 25 years old when she secretly gave birth to a baby in her apartment in a bathtub. She claims that she did not know that she was pregnant and said that the father was an ex-boyfriend that she had no contact with. Shortly after delivering him, she put her hand over his face, feeling his little breaths until there were none. She then put him inside of a plastic Walmart bag, taking away any chance that he had at life. At first, she tried to say that she didn't do it on purpose, but again, we know from the autopsy that that baby was born alive. He had air in his lungs and he was alive for minutes, taking breaths before Carrie did what she did. She describes taking him out of her apartment and into her car like someone would take out groceries or take out the trash. She then wrapped him in a towel, lit the towel on fire to destroy her fingerprints, and dumped the body in a flower bed at Washington Park. She went home, she lived her life, and she never once said a thing about it. Carrie Mazuka was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, concealment of a human corpse, and tampering with physical evidence. In February of 2025, she pled guilty. And 2 months later, she stood before a judge for sentencing. At sentencing, she read a statement that reads, quote, I'm sorry, I did a horrible, unimaginable thing, and I live with remorse and regret. I'm a great mom. I've lived a law-abiding life, and I do deserve a lengthy sentence. I just hope you use some discretion and go to the lower end, end quote. The prosecution was not moved by her statement, and the deputy chief argued that while Carrie admitted to what she did, she still took little to no responsibility. A probation officer's written statement noted that Albany police detectives were more affected by the baby Moses case than Carrie was herself. And before sentencing, the prosecution left the jury with a reminder of how short the life was that he lived, stating that his short-lived life was, quote, filled with nothing but suffering and pain, and that suffering and pain came at the hands of the defendant, end quote. The judge then stated, quote, I will call him Baby Moses and not Baby Spielman, because the detectives and officers who found him and gave him that name showed more love and consideration for your child than you ever did, end quote. Carrie Mazuka was sentenced to 25 years in state prison, finally facing justice after almost 3 decades of living in a lie. It's cases like these that keep me up at night because a family would have loved that baby. If Carrie didn't want it, someone would have wanted that baby, and he would have been the biggest miracle to a family, and he would probably live a life full of love. He didn't have a chance. That is all for me today. Let me know your thoughts on this case, and thank you guys so much for spending time with me and for listening to Baby Moses' story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day, make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
She deep-fried his head and then baked his ribs in the oven with barbecue sauce. On December 1st of 1991, 23-year-old fashion model Oma Nelson drove to her friend Jose's house. She was clearly upset and asked him for a shocking favor. She needed help to get rid of her husband's body. Jose was taken aback and found it hard to believe what he was hearing. He tells her he doesn't want involved and asks her to leave his home. Jose decided to call police to report the strange conversation. This prompted authorities to search the home Oma shared with her husband, Bill Nelson. What they found there was shocking and completely unexpected. The crime scene at their home was unlike anything authorities had ever seen before. They discovered that most of the furniture was stained with blood and human flesh. The entire house was just in complete disarray. Then this is when they see the pot on the stove. It looks like dinner's inside. It was chunks of Bill. However, what was found in the freezer was far more disturbing. They find Bill Nelson's head wrapped in aluminum foil, which turned out to have been deep fried. She deep fried his head.
They found his hands nearby, just the hands. But listen to this. He had been killed on Thanksgiving. Then afterwards, in a twisted attempt at a meal, mixed parts of his cut off hips into the cranberry sauce they had had for Thanksgiving. And to make things worse, she took his ribs, baked them in the oven, and then ate them with barbecue sauce. Omaima said that her husband's ribs tasted like how she likes her ribs any other time. Very sweet. His torso was hanging in the shower. It had been carved, cut up, just like a butcher shop. Because Bill was killed on Thanksgiving, she had taken the leftover Thanksgiving food and mixed it with a lot of his body parts, like, peas, mashed potatoes, the stuff that they had to kind of put them together to like remake the Thanksgiving meal all over again. I'm not 100% sure. It was weird. Due to the state the body was in, they could not immediately tell the cause of death, but they do figure it out during the autopsy. If you do not want to hear the graphic details of what happened to Bill Nelson, you are free to scroll. But if you want to stick around and hear what happened and how this all unraveled, let's get into it. When Omaima hit adulthood, like her early 20s, she was known for her striking good looks, which she used to her advantage, drawing them in with her beauty and confidence. Men would do anything she asked them to. However, Omaima had a hidden side. When Omaima would get these men right where she wanted them to, she would tie them up, tell them that this was going to be some type of sexual fantasy with bondage, right? She would then get a weapon, hold them hostage, and tell them to give her money. She would take whatever money they would give her, and then she would leave. This was a common trap that she used, and this was how 23-year-old Omaima made a living. Until October of 1991, when she meets 56-year-old Bill Nelson. Bill was an ex-Marine and former pilot. And she met him pretty much the same way she met all the other men that she had fooled in the past, at bars. Bill immediately fell in love with her. Bill was old school. If he was going to be getting into a relationship, he wanted to be married. He didn't just want a fling or one-night stand if he was going to take the relationship serious. So 2 days after meeting Omaima, he proposed. And they got married less than a month later. Soon after their marriage, it was one late night, and Omaima wanted to introduce something new to Bill, involving bondage. And he was willing to try it. She tied him up, and while in the past, her usual steps would be tell a man, hey, let's try bondage in like a sexual way. She would hold them hostage with like a weapon and rob them and then run off. Instead of doing that like she usually did, she began to beat him in the head with an iron. And then for whatever reason, went and got a pair of scissors and stabbed him in the chest and all over the head. She claimed that Bill tried to sexually her that night, but investigators believe that she just made this up in order to get out of what she had done. Investigators spoke with neighbors to see if they had heard anything, because sure enough they had to have, right? The neighbors under Bill's apartment claimed that the entire Thanksgiving weekend they heard Bill's garbage disposal going, like the entire time, like it was working hard to grind up something. Bill's body was cut to such precision that the coroner was concerned and thought that Omaima might have done this before. Investigators described the cuts on Bill's body with, in their words, professional. Even crazier part was that 180 pounds of Bill's body was missing. Like, my lord, this girl was getting to work. She said that she didn't kill her husband, and then she said that something told her to. She said that she had demons in her brain. She would speak very baby-like, and she would often just pace around the room and just stare off into space, and just sounded almost like she sounded like a baby, like a child, during like every interrogation that she had. But they want to know, like, who is Omaima? Where did she come from? Like, who is this girl? They find out that Omaima grew up in a impoverished farming town in Egypt. They dig a little bit more on Omaima's history and found out that she was a child to 15 other siblings. She grew up with a very abusive father in the household who would abuse her physically and would sexually abuse her. So he was, doing sexual things to her like her entire childhood, all the way up until I guess she left home. That's really all she knew until she came to America. And she also became a model. So, I don't really know much else on Omaima. When I found out that she baked his ribs in the oven and then had the audacity to add barbecue sauce, girl, what the fuck? She has tried to get parole twice, and then actually next year in 2016, girl, it is not 2016. In 2026, she is eligible. I think she's going to try to get parole again. Like, y'all better not let her out. I would be concerned. Okay, that was it. That was today's case. I will get another one out for you guys soon. I love you guys. Bye.